Meeting to order of August 3rd of...
There you go. You just regained the statue.
Anything we can help you with, Mr. Kusia?
No, with him.
Oh.
No.
I'd like to call the meeting to order of August 13th. Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Individual. I did. All right. First, second item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes, which we are going to postpone until the September meeting, and I'll write it down now. Valerie, when is the September meeting?
The 10th.
September 10th. Thank you. Next meeting on the agenda is the continued public hearing of Sunjay Incorporated, 260 Winthrop Avenue. Nothing for you to read tonight, Mr. Clerk.
Then there's no reason for me to be here?
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
If y'all could just introduce yourselves for the record.
I'm just going to grab my glasses because I come
Hi, my name is Mukesh Patel. I'm the manager at the Sanjay Inc.
Thank you.
And good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Sanjay. I'm their legal counsel. And
Jeffrey Carlson on behalf of Global and ExxonMobil.
Thank you. Thank you all.
thank
Why
you.
don't you tell me, so we are continued from July. Why don't you tell me where have we tread in the last month or so?
We've tread through difficult waters. So last time we were here, we presented to you a sign, and just to quickly go through it, it's 260 Winthrop Street. It's the mobile Exxon gas station located literally at the point at which the Shawshene River crosses 114 and where your property line basically for the town is. We were here to request a variance to allow the continuation of an internally illuminated sign. At that particular hearing, we were asked to go back and reconsider our petition and see what relief we would be able to get from ExxonMobil. So immediately following that meeting, we actually went back to ExxonMobil and their marketing group and asked them, can we please put an externally illuminated sign, to which we received no. Basically because we have a currently internally illuminated sign, and their branding documents require internal illumination with a flagpole design. And their one give is that they'll allow a monument sign, which is a center pole. So we went back and forth a little bit. Pardon me, Jeff Carlson, our Exxon representative, went back and forth with the powers that be and asked, look, is there anything we can do? And again, you received the sign documentation, the standard design that we were given from ExxonMobil. To be quite frank, my client's a little frustrated. I think Mobil's a little frustrated with our constant, can you change it? We really want to update this sign. We think it's necessary. We've just put somewhere in the vicinity of $300,000 into the property just to upgrade the pumps. That doesn't include the cost that my client just invested in the building itself, and it really needs to have an updated sign. The sign is not appropriate. It's not. It's too large. It's too close to the street, and it's in need of repair. It's old. It's very old. It has those manual sign, boards, which are also very out of date and exceptionally unprofessional looking, and to make a property not look as up to date. It's an old, used look. And we are desperate to be able to put in the pricing the pricing part, as well as a new sign. I recognize that this board has those requirements, and I appreciate it. And I know that we're asking for superlative relief. I recognize what a variance means. It basically means, look, we have standards, and you're asking us to change those standards. You're asking us for extraordinary relief. And we believe this is an extraordinary circumstance, first of all, because it's already an internally illuminated sign, honestly, and because after, I think Ms. McIntyre actually was the one who pointed it out, we are at the weirdest spot in all of North Andover. And you know what? We are, because of course I went back and pulled all the maps, and it's the point at which your boundary actually follows the Shawshene River. So it does this. So right where our property is, that marks the last location in North Andover for commercial property on 114. Now it goes back, and you have all the other properties along the Shawshene on the opposite side. And that's why we have all those internally illuminated signs, because none of them are in North Andover. Not across the street, not within 1,000 feet. So we struggle, and so does mobile, with that competition. We did try to get relief. We weren't allowed to get relief. We can't abandon the sign. We need a sign. And the result would be to keep that sign. We definitely don't want to keep the sign, but we also are bound by a franchisor, and we don't have the legal authority to do anything other than comply with their design standards. So I guess we're back here to ask for your indulgence and to actually recognize that the hardship is that we literally have to keep an old sign that will eventually fall into complete disrepair, simply maintain the lighting, and have absolutely no right to change it under Exxon's design criteria. And the one thing we can ask is that you give us the relief to simply permit the continuance. The actual sign itself that is illuminated, by the way, will be reduced from 49 feet is the actual sign, the square footage area of the existing illuminated sign. We're going to 22 feet for the illuminated sign with the message, the pricing below. That's where the additional 20-something feet goes. So no matter what, the sign area is always beneath the 50-foot total area requirement, including the pricing sign portion that's allowed for a gas station. And I guess that's why we're here, is to repeat, unfortunately, our request.
So in the ways that, mobile won't give you relief, the franchisor won't give you relief, unfortunately, we're butting up against two parties.
We are.
That are kind of similarly situated, and the ask from the board, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, I'm just gonna, kind of the same way that you were largely telling us things that we already knew. I'm just gonna kind of say things out loud so that we have the discussion. It's awfully hard for this board to be confronted essentially with an applicant. Unfortunately, your client's the applicant, who is the mouthpiece of perhaps a bigger fish, we could say. But we have an applicant who is saying, essentially telling us to go pound sand. And it's really hard for me to hear go pound sand when there was, look, there were two parties we're meeting, because your application offered a handful of nonconformities that were going to be eliminated, which is something that goes a long way in my, in the way that I think about things, not speaking about my fellow board members. But the way I think about things, if you're eliminating or reducing at a minimum a handful of nonconformities, we're certainly on the right path to finding a way to become aligned. So while not perfect, there was an offer, I think brainstormed by Ms. McIntyre, to kind of split the baby, to offer the relief that is that I think so desperately needed, is to not have to go out there to this 1954 numbers every time the gas changes price. I hear you loud and clear on that. Today's market is very different from 1954, and so the internally illuminated, or whatever you want to call that, the digitized price board is something that's extraordinarily sensible. I get it. What I was hoping, and frankly expecting, perhaps naively, was expecting that mobile would get it too, and unfortunately mobile doesn't. If I had the authority, quite frankly, I think you know this, if I had the authority to say, no, you can have this, but you can't have that, and here's the decision, that's a path that I would certainly encourage my board members to follow. I don't have that authority. I can't tell you what sign you have to install. I kind of have to take the application, and the application isn't asking me for that kind of sign. So it leaves me in a spot that's no different than we were a month ago, unfortunately, in spite of the fact that you've done an awful lot of legwork, perhaps an awful lot of headbanging against the wall. And now we have your client, a North Andover man of commerce, who is stuck in that middle. We all report to somebody, and I'm reporting to what this is, and I'm not finding, as I sit here with the conversation that we're having now, I'm not finding a hardship associated with an internally illuminated sign when it just comes to mobile needing to be the biggest guy on the block. So I mean, that's where I was last time. That's kind of where I still am today. The other board members may share that, they may not. They can certainly share their opinions or their suggestions. I'm only one vote, but I remain all ears.
Well, can I say something?
I hope you do.
The young lady did an excellent presentation. However, you omitted one thing. It's a grandfathered, pre-existing use,
Oh, it is.
okay? And hopefully the board will recognize that it's a grandfathered, pre-existing use, okay? And you are making the situation better, okay? And do we want to send a message out to the whole community, North Andover doesn't want things to improve? Okay? Because that's what I hear the board wants to do. We do
Not
not
the
want to
board, I'm just-
improve
I'm
things.
just one voice.
We do not want to accept grandfathered, pre-existing uses. They want to make it better. They're bringing things within the setbacks. They're reducing the size of the sign. Okay? They're reducing the size of the sign. And if they leave things as is that good for the town of North Andover? That's a symbol to me. We don't want to improve things. Everybody who passes that mobile sign says, we do not want to improve. We want to stay archaic in the town of North Andover. You're talking a lousy sign at a point on 114 that faces another gas station that backs up to Market Basket, all right? What are we talking about? I can't believe this conversation has gone this far.
Nor
Honest to
can
God,
I.
it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the town of North Andover that has gone this far. It's a pre-existing grandfathered use. Give them the relief they need. That's why they come to the board, and that's why the board is created.
If I could just say a word?
Absolutely.
So I appreciate everybody's candor. Sure, Jeff again from Global and representing Exxon. So to the board member about the pre-existing sign, the kind of where we are right now is if we did replace the whole sign as it was, it would still literally be the same type of sign that we already have as it is now. There was another situation we could possibly try to pursue where we would leave the sign and then add the LEDs, but to the board member, we're still sitting on an internally illuminated sign, so it would just be a new one. Or we would have the old one with the new LEDs. But, I mean, the fact that we're improving the other pieces of the property, the fact that the site is literally on the borderline of the town, and with all due respect to North Andover, that my point is just to be or stay competitive in the marketplace. Mr. Mukesh has spent, tons of money on the place, improving it, making it the way it is. From my point of view is if we try to reduce as many of the numbers of nonconformities as it sits right now, we would end up with a better sign, looks better, obviously, to lower the amount of issues as far as sidewalk and getting some space on the corner right there. But, the fact is that we do want to do something better. Global's actually paying for the sign. It's not even ExxonMobil. So we want to have a good sign that looks nice, draws customers in to kind of play off the rest of the improvements that we've done to the site. So, I've tried to drudge up anything I could as far as getting the marketing team on board with ExxonMobil, making sure that they understood where, the board lies and where we lie with the decisions, and kind of where, to your point, stuck at the same type of situation, regardless of all the work that we've done as far as even trying to get to this point. So, I respect your time, and if there's obviously any questions,
So
I can try to
I
answer.
actually have a couple of
Sure.
questions. So, I mean, you have, mobile has their standard, but you have to
Sure.
understand North Andover has their standard as well.
Agreed.
And you can't tell me that all the signs in all of the United States, there is not one externally lit mobile sign.
Right, but you have to remember what you're asking mobile to do is to remove an internally illuminated sign. You take them out of that. It's internally illuminated presently. Therein lies the huge issue. It's different. So while you're saying to them, look, those are our standards, you already have an internally illuminated sign. I understand your
You're changing
rules.
it.
that-
You weren't changing it.
Again, you must understand.
You actually had your say, now it's
Okay.
like my
And so,
turn.
and so the reason is because it is internally illuminated. Again, you have to understand that this is a large franchisor. I understand your position. But the reason for signage, the reason for the rule is not really applicable here. You aren't operating, you're not allowing a business to operate on a level playing field because every single solitary gas station around them is internally illuminated, every one. So what you're
Are they in
doing.
North Andover?
Again, But again, you have the power to allow a North Andover business, an entity that supports your town, creates tax dollars for you, generates revenue for your town, generates jobs for your towns, and brings a reputation to your town. You have the opportunity to allow that business to thrive and succeed. That's why people come to a zoning board of appeals. The other town, I
So
realize
actually,
they're not
You know,
there.
we're gonna probably have a difference of opinion, and
I
whatever
know,
you say
yeah.
is just, I mean, for 10 things you say, I can say 10 things
But I can't
opposing
understand,
it.
but what would be the
Because
purpose?
it's a standard for North Andover.
But what's the purpose?
It's a standard for
But
North
other than
Andover
just the
as it's a
rhetoric,
standard.
like-
That's my purpose,
Okay, I didn't know if you
those
had
are
one.
my feelings, whether
understand.
you agree with them or not,
And
that's
you're-
how I feel.
And I agree, and you're entitled to that. I just meant if there was something, like a greater purpose for always endorsing it. You know, when that's what a variance is for, I guess, for me, is when you see a differentiation, like, and you're saying to yourself, okay, you know what, these rules are wonderful, and they mean something, and that's why it's a variance and not a special permit, right? Because you really need that heightened relief. You need to be able to differentiate yourself from every other property around, and this property couldn't be more different than any other property around.
But you are also the gateway to North Andover. So this is the entrance to North Andover as well. So you're entering North Andover at that point.
With
So you-
all due respect, I'm just gonna, I don't think even if you drove that road 10 times that you would actually know where the borderline is.
I do. I mean,
Well, do
it's
you
just,
live in North Andover?
yeah.
The majority of
this is-
traffic, let's say, has no idea where the borderline is. And with all due respect, I still understand it's in North Andover, and,
And
I'll
that's
give you
your-
that deference. I'm just saying, if it is such a noticeable spot, where the borderline crosses should be a big deal, but I couldn't tell you where it crossed unless I look at the map.
I have some questions. So this is where I get to be the associate member who's still learning a lot here. This is to some degree to the chair, but I think it'll help the discussion a little bit. So under the situation that we are in now, if they wanted to keep this frame and put whatever they want inside of that, are they currently entitled to do that? Or are they not allowed to make any alterations to the face of that sign?
Well, they have an internally illuminated sign, they can
Right.
continue to have an internally illuminated sign. In other words, are you asking, can they expand?
No, not can they expand, but can they refurbish the front of it? Can they replace the plates?
Say it went
Can they
from
put
mobile
in-
to Exxon. I mean, to-
Right, or can they
The name.
they put in just like a refreshed, set of numbers that fit within that frame of that illuminated sign? Can they,
Yeah,
are
I don't know the
they,
answer. I don't think that they could put the internally illuminated price signage.
Could they
like take-
up-
well, if it's
Take out
within
the
that,
manual board.
Yeah, they're
within what
not
is
changing
currently
it.
illuminated?
They wouldn't need to come for a variance because they're not changing it. They're not asking for a variance, it's already internally illuminated.
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I don't know.
because I guess the reason I'm asking that question is that to me, we are not truly discussing whether or not we get to have an illuminated sign on this road. We are discussing the shape, the placement, and to some extent the orientation of that sign. And I understand certainly that we have members of the board that feel that we have a rule that we have created and it was created for a purpose. But whether we like it or not, there is an illuminated sign here. There will remain an illuminated sign here. And that if they are allowed to change that shape to what they want, then they can do what they want there. They are trying to offer a better solution. And I guess our choice is whether we think that solution is better. But we're not going to be stopping them from having an illuminated sign. There is not a world in which we can order them to only have an externally illuminated sign in front of their property. So I am certainly sympathetic to the idea that we want to have a uniform code in our town that makes it a certain way, but this location is going to violate that standard regardless of what we want to do.
Thank you.
I have a question, I might have missed it. How'd the sign get there in the first place?
Oh, boy, when it was first.
I mean,
Yeah, when it was first built, you didn't have a
Yeah.
limitation. That is one old gas station.
okay, so
Yeah.
that was
It's
pretty much
pre-exi-
put there before,
Yeah, pre-existing non-conforming, so it was done under a permit when the building was originally constructed. I mean,
So this wasn't something they ever came,
Oh, I don't think they've ever been given
Yeah, I would
zoning
doubt it.
relief, no. Site plan
Yeah.
approval.
I don't know, but I would
probably.
doubt it. We've become a regulatory society.
you know, signage, sidewalks, heights.
Yeah.
So, clarification for me. So today, we're already an exception, as Mike pointed out. And if that sign needs to be replaced tomorrow, it will continue to be, quote, grandfathered with the internal, I'm asking, let me direct this to the chairman. So if they needed to replace, when they need to replace the sign, will it be replaced with will we continue to be in violation of our bylaws?
If it's
Will it continue
replaced.
to be grandfathered, do you mean?
Yes. Will it continue, so if it, when it is replaced, will it continue to be under the grandfather, meaning in exception to our bylaws?
So if they replace it as is,
I'm sorry?
if they replace it as is and put a new pole in, and keep everything exactly the same?
The question I'm asking is if it needed to be replaced, what would it be replaced with?
So like if the sign fell down,
Correct.
so if it got hit by a plow and it fell down,
An
could the
exact
applicant
replica.
put up an exact replica?
An exact replica.
That would be my understanding.
So,
I wouldn't die on that hill, but that would be my understanding.
meaning it will continue to be then, quote, in violation with our bylaws,
Forever and ever,
correct?
forever and ever.
Unless the bylaws change.
Okay.
Unless the bylaws change.
And then therefore, although I'm not voting tonight, it will always be in violation, and there is some caveats in moving in being able to eliminate a couple of the other problems that are already there. And so it will always be in violation. Now it's a matter, okay, and so I don't think that this is, I think that we are able to, it's going to continue to be in violation, but now the sign will be moved to a new position. We'll be eliminating a couple of the problems. So I see it as there is no complete win on either side. It's a matter of what is in the best interest, I think, of the town of North Andover. So just some observations that I'm making as I listen to the discussion.
Thanks.
So I'll echo that, because I think it's a very good point. I think the request is to replace an internally lit sign with an internally lit sign, which solves some problems that the current one has. And that makes sense. The second thing I would say is, yes, it is in North Andover, and if I had to guess, which was a safe guess, that zoning law exists to preserve the character of the town of North Andover. This zoning board exists to find out where the right exceptions would be to those zoning laws. My personal opinion is, given where the gas station is located, that it's right on the line, that it's right near the highway, that is in competitive striking distance of other gas stations in Lawrence that, excuse me, have internal lit signs, this is not an unreasonable request. So putting the competitive piece with the business piece, with the fact that we get a better internal lit sign than keep an old one there, this strikes me as being a very reasonable request, which does not lead us down the slippery slope to having a ugly commercialized town.
Thank you. Anything else?
So you are asking for a variance?
Yes, I am.
And because the standards are in your variance, the reason you're asking for a variance, soil shape, topography, I mean, I don't, for me, I don't feel that you've met that requirement because mobile standards require you to have an internally.
I can go through it. So the shape and the location, the topography of the property is because literally it abuts the Shawshene River, and because of where it is located within your town, location is an aspect. So it's got to be related to the lot itself. So when you look at the odd configuration, like if you have the map, you can see how it is the oddest shape. Do you mind just giving that to them? It's just your map. It just shows where the property is. It's very odd. It is on 114, but your boundary isn't 114. So what the boundary is, we share a front boundary with 114, and then it goes like this, where Shawsheen is. So the Shawsheen River kind of wraps the property, and you can see where then immediately adjacent to it is Lawrence. And it is very oddly shaped and positioned. And because of that, it creates a very unique circumstance that is incomparable to any property you have in Lawrence, literally incomparable. There's no place else that is this odd. So that is what the uniqueness is. Now for the hardship can be related to an economic, it can be related to, and it can actually be related, by the way, to the people in the town. So the hardship is you have to retain this non-conforming sign that is within 3 feet, that it kind of hangs into the right-of-way, which it's not supposed to. It's 22 feet tall, and it's an odd shape. Like, the sign is a very large sign in comparison to what they're actually even proposing. So therein lies the hardship and how it can be attenuated. And the actual reason it's such a hardship is because there's this provision that says, you know, no matter what, you can't compete. And competition can actually be the hardship. It's the competition around you as well. I mean, it is very difficult for businesses like that to survive when somebody else has something, unfortunately, better. In the perception of the millennials driving by, better. They like the price, they like the electronic pricing boards, they do. It's just the dynamic of current day society. So the hardship is we can't compete. To the point of whether or not we can repair, we absolutely can. It's a certain dollar value under your bylaw. So, you know, that's why we can't do all of those repairs within that parameter, or we wouldn't have to go for a variance. We could do it within the non-conforming aspect, but we can't because it costs too much to actually move it and make everything right, because we have to redo everything. We have to redo the pole, the foundation, everything has to be redone, which triggers the cost. And that was to your point, Mr. Liss, and also to your point, Ms. Fagan. So that's why we can't make that change. As far as the board's ability to actually provide the relief, you can do so in full keeping with your bylaw. So basically, does it really affect the viewscape? It actually improves the viewscape because it's going to push it back. It's going to make the sign go down in size. Everything about it is going to be better. You're going to communicate better to the public because we're going to provide the pricing board that's electronic. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than driving through a sign and seeing a number 5, then a number 4 that's a different color and a different font, and then the first number's gone. I won't even go in a gas station like that. I know that doesn't sound right, and it probably shouldn't be right, but I wouldn't either. So that's why we want to maintain a competitive advantage. All gas stations that can afford to do it are trying to do it, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean,
there's not one gas station on that road that has an electronic sign.
I think isn't the one across the street, the Gulf, doesn't it have it? No, not yet?
Downtown Middleton has it on 114.
Yeah.
Cumberland Farms.
Yeah, Cumberland Farms does,
That Cumberland
and they're all
Farms sign
starting, yeah.
And I go by it every day.
Middleton.
That is externally illuminated. The only thing that's internally illuminated is the price.
Yeah, you're allowed to do it in Middleton because I permit there. We do it everywhere.
But I did offer that solution as well.
We can't do it. Again, Ms. McIntyre, if we could do it, we would have done it. We left here with that dictate, and trust me, all I did every day to poor Jeff was, well. I mean, I must have pinged the poor man literally every day. Send him an email.
Jeff is, I know.
From mobile. I apologize. And I wanted that solution because at minimum, I wanted to be able to provide the electronic pricing board because what's there now is just not in keeping with what they've done with the facility, and it shouldn't be that shouldn't be in the town. And so we're asking for this relief, and again, I know it's great. I know what a variance is, and I know that it's super relief. I recognize it, and that's why your board has to vote for in favor. It can't just be a majority, and I recognize that. It has to be a supermajority. And we're asking for the relief because we're trying to improve the viewscape coming into your town, and I think this will in fact do it. I mean, I'm not a resident, I'm not a board member, so all I do is petition and hope that I can provide for you an argument upon which you can base a decision that would be right for the community and what is our opinion.
So let me ask you something else. You have all these standards here with mobile that have a lot of,
Oh,
and the one that you're doing is not on here.
the flag one?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're allowed to do it instead of using the monument sign. That's one of.
No, what I'm
Oh,
saying,
oh.
the panels. So you only have 3 panels on the sign you're proposing. Am I going to go down the street and see 5 panels like this
No,
one? Or
no.
is it?
It's exactly what you
Having 2?
No, exactly what you see on that sign is exactly what we've been able to get approved. You are not going to see 5 panels, no.
Like I say, Dunkin' Donuts, you know.
No, it
down
is.
there, Dunkin' Donuts, and you're going to see a little.
No, you are
Yeah.
not. Anything we would do would have to be approved by mobile and would have to be approved by you. Because with a variance, we're not allowed to touch. The design you see in front of you is the only design we can do. There is no modification permitted in a variance approval, none.
So then just regular gas and diesel gas, that's all you'd be advertising?
Yeah, I apologize, is that what it says, regular and diesel? I left my glasses at home.
That is all
Yeah,
it says.
thank you.
Yeah, regular and diesel.
So just as a party word, we're in alignment. I think across the board, we're in alignment. I agree with just about everything that has been said by this side of the table and by that side of the table. I get it. The beef that I have, not we, the beef that I have is not with this applicant, is not with his representative, is not with necessarily Jeff, I've forgotten your last
Jeff
name, so
Carlson, yeah.
I make it sound so informal, and I
No, it's
apologize.
okay.
My beef is that we offered a solution, or I suggested a solution. Ms. McIntyre offered a solution, and I was firmly not in favor of any of the internal illumination. Ms. McIntyre had offered the middle ground of let's illuminate the digitized pricing sign, but externally illuminate the thing that says mobile. That offers lots of communication to the patrons. The millennials love that sign. You've reduced an awful lot of nonconformities by moving it back. You're modernizing. Everything looks pretty. The problem that I'm now having, and I'm going to dig in, is I've got mobile telling me to go pound sand. I've got mobile telling the town of North Andover, in spite of the hundreds of signs in your town, in spite of the national and international retail establishments in your town, all externally illuminated, we're going to be the ones that are driving this ship. And unfortunately, if it's an emotional vote, call it arbitrary. There's plenty of discretion that the board can afford here. But now I'm drawing a line in the sand. Ms. McIntyre offered a solution. I suggested the same solution, and the applicant said no. Mobile is the only thing that is going to be externally illuminated. It's going to be a fresh new sign. It's going to be lit, and it's going to be on the doorstep of Lawrence. But guess what? That's the doorstep of North Andover, as Ms. McIntyre said, if you're coming in the other direction. So yeah, this is the town that I have been appointed to enforce the code and to bend in the code where the situation suggests. And I would suggest to you that in this case, where there is a more than feasible alternative, just externally illuminate mobile, internally illuminate the pricing sign, let the franchisee control the pricing from the inside on February 12th in 22-degree weather. All of those things are possible. Every bit of this sign is possible. But mobile says no. I require the town of North Andover to deliver to me an internally illuminated sign. And my answer is, as politely as possible to you guys, I can't do that.
But the only person you're hurting is him. You're hurting the town and you're hurting him. Mobile doesn't, it's
That's right.
mobile's-
They don't care about their franchisee.
They do,
so
but
don't
they-
hang that on me.
I know, but
if mobile were
you have a
coming to the
choice,
table,
yeah.
then mobile would care about their franchisee. Mobile would care about its business. Mobile doesn't. So why should I? Because we have an applicant here, someone who cares about the community. I get it, loud and clear. I get it. And unfortunately, it's in North Andover with an extraordinarily clear code, an extraordinarily capable attorney. You give a heck of a presentation, by the way. But it's still somebody telling me no when I think that Ms. McIntyre has been reasonable in the suggestion. I think that I have been reasonable. But somebody still says, "Pff, you mean nothing to me. You're going to do as I say." Or we're going to tug on your heartstrings and make it play like we're hurting our residents here. So, I mean, those are my feelings. Of course, that can certainly open things up. If we want to just go to final word from the applicant and go to a vote, that's totally fine with me as well.
Yeah, I would just say, as somebody who grew up in the 60s and 70s, nobody wants to stuff a large corporation more than I would. It's just the nature of the era I grew up in. However, I also understand, after having worked for 41 years, the importance of branding to an organization. Right? In the case of the compromise, if you recall, I was against raising the compromise at that point because I didn't think we had fleshed out the discussion. From my standpoint, yeah, it adds an emotional element, which I hope we get over. Right? It would have been nice to see some wiggle room. Right? But from my standpoint, you light a piece of it, you light all of it, it doesn't. It's a lit sign, right? And it's a better looking lit sign than we have. So yeah, it's an emotional thing. I get it. I don't think anybody's going to get it more than I do. But I think it's just something we have to get over.
It wasn't emotional at the onset.
I know.
So I was perfectly, a month ago, I was rational.
You know,
I'm no longer rational. We can put that on the record. I'm no longer rational. A month ago, I was rational and said, "This is a nice job, Ms. McIntyre. You know, you're walking me off the ledge of a straight up no vote to an internally illuminated sign. Thank you for playing against that." And now a month later, I'm not rational because my effort to be rational, to be reasonable, was summarily discarded. And that's not something I think that this board should welcome.
Let me ask a question.
Please.
If the answer here is no, what happens?
Nothing. So the sign stays as is. We can do minor modifications up to a certain dollar amount, and some of those will stay, but it'll continue to be a 22-foot sign located in your right-of-way, 3 feet from the line. I understand. I, too, grew up in the 60s. I, too, can have a little bit of a ruffling factor with regard to big corporate America, and was not thrilled by their reaction, as you can imagine. Notwithstanding, I know what's going to happen. Absolutely nothing. We're going to come in. We're going to do minor modifications. You're not going to get any conformities out of the sign. So it will be maybe an initially gratifying no, right? It will be, and it will be gratifying initially. And then every time you drive by that sign and you see that Mobile has a sign still that just isn't anywhere near what it should be, you probably be like, oh, you know, I wish they had done something different, but we can't. And honestly, we want it to look nice. We came here and we want it to look nice. We struggle with it. We could have just made a small modification, and we're entitled to do that for the repair. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to make it comply. I mean, at least make it comply. Bring down the size, bring it back. It shouldn't be in the right of way. Make it nice. Make it so that it looks good along with all of the other property. Bring it into keeping. Cut out some of the foundation. Put a nice planting bed around it. We wanted to do all that. We can't do any of it under your bylaw because to do it, we have to completely conform. Completely. Or come back here for a variance, which is why we're here. So I guess I would, you know, once again repeat my fervent request that, you know, you rethink the impact to the town, you rethink the value of a sign that will be brand new, that will be better. It is still going to, it will be internally lit no matter what. And it's not a threat. We're not, trust me, there's no, there's no threat here. I don't know what else to say other than we don't have a choice. And I get the issue with Mobile, but trust me, that is not Mr. Patel's reaction. He would have given you your modified request. He would have.
The zoning code is North Andover's brand standard. So the ask is, hey, North Andover, why don't you bend your brand standards, but we Mobile aren't going to allow our franchisee to bend brand standards.
Right, but remember,
so there's not necessarily such an the choice is not only I'm going to just speak for myself, is not only mine in a no vote. The choice is Mobile's, and it's yours and the franchisees. You can certainly put up a different sign. You can put up a lovely sign. It's just not going to be internally illuminated. You can put up a totally conforming sign. You can do that. This is not a choice between no sign or an ugly sign or the perfect sign. It is not, those are not the only choices.
No.
The choices include, let's back it up, making conforming can be externally illuminated. I mean, you can have a brand new sign tomorrow if it's conforming.
Again, I think, you know what, honestly, you hit the nail on the head. You can have a brand-new sign. This isn't one, it's a replacement, and that is the pinnacle upon which this decision should be made. It is an existing sign. So it really isn't a choice. You already have it. You can
Yeah.
make it better, or you cannot. And that really should be, like, once you say to yourself, okay, I'm not gonna be irritated at Mobile because it's not gonna serve a purpose. I'm gonna look at what happens if not. And if you look at what happens if not, you're stuck with an ugly sign that isn't nice. If you do yes, you get a much better sign that complies, that is a lot nicer looking than what's there now. I get it. Again, I do. I'm just asking you to kind of step back maybe and say to yourself, okay, you know what, Mobile, you're not doing us any service, and if you ever try to put in a brand-new gas station with a brand-new sign and you have absolutely nothing to lay your hat on, you're going to be externally illuminated all day long with no pricing board. I can understand that position.
And Mobile is going to send you in with a very sympathetic applicant. And then we're going to be in the same exact conversation.
Oh, you aren't, because I don't have you won't be not with me, because I don't have any, what am I going to argue? How am I can't argue that it's there, right? Oh, go ahead, I apologize.
No, it's fine. I think, because I agree with you and I understand, I truly hate Mobile turning around and telling us to eat sand. I think it's rude and all of that, and there's no compromise, and life should be compromised. Nothing against you, Jeff. But I think in this instance, I think one of the things, and it may not necessarily be Mobile, because I'm going to assume back when this sign was put up, it wasn't Mobile and it wasn't Exxon and it was, Joe Schmo gas station. This is kind of one of those situations where early bird got the worm, and whoever put the sign in, they beat us. Because yes, our bylaws say no internally illuminated sign, but that bylaw wasn't there then. So they kind of beat us to it.
Right, times have changed.
So
right?
I think it's different versus, yes, if she were to come in here
Yep.
with a brand new, pretty spanking, empty piece of land, and if Mobile were to turn around and be like, sorry, this is our standard, then yeah, I agree with you. We could turn around and say, you can eat sand because this is our standard, and we were here first. But in this situation, this sign was here first. So that kind of going with the aspect of the grandfathered, it's not even so much a grandfather issue where this sign had come to zoning board and somebody had made an exception. And the argument of you put up one sign and now the whole entire stretch of North Andover is filled with these signs is a bunch of bull. Only because multiple times it's come up, we're not setting a precedent. Every single
That's right.
situation is very differently. So if Joe Schmo comes in here next month wanting an illuminated sign on Main Street, we can easily turn around and say, you can eat sand because this is what our bylaw is. So I think that really is one of the big things that they got to bite at the apple first with this sign.
Yep, time has changed and time has passed. So this sign was built in a time when, so this sign has run its course. I think we all agree. The sign that is currently there has run its course. And in the interim, a new brand has been established in North Andover that says no more internally illuminated signs. I didn't create, I agree with it and
So what
everything,
about
but
the
I didn't create it. This is not a gotcha to this applicant. This applicant is new. This applicant bought this franchise knowing the landscape, or should have known, the landscape of the zoning map.
But what about
Knew
the
what
other
knew what he
sign?
was getting into, so this isn't a surprise.
But what about the other sign? And Ellen, you might know more about this. The only other internally illuminated sign, which is on the border of North Andover and Lawrence, next to 495. I have no idea what the building is and what the sign is. Isn't there?
I don't know.
The bank?
Oh, right on the highway?
Right there. That got put up. That got put up more recent than this. And my understanding
People's
was
United Bank, or on top of the,
People's Bank.
yeah,
People's
on top of the
United-
building.
Okay, so that was a situation that's, and granted, I have no idea because I don't know the history of that one, if that was internally illuminated to begin with. which is a huge different situation than this, where he already has this. So now I kind of sit here and say, what's the difference? The difference being is that he actually has more of a benefit because he has this sign. But I also don't know the history of that sign being put up.
I'm not understanding the correlation, or the connection, other than it's an internally illuminated sign in North
Well, because
Andover.
if you're
That I hear you.
Was that one grandfathered in? Was that one?
I don't have any
given a
idea.
variance? Yeah, that's.
No idea.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's not the first, and
It's,
I
it's,
don't see it being a situation where it's gonna blow up across Main Street. That's all.
No.
But I will say, yes, Volvo was jerks for not coming back with some kind of a compromise.
If I may ask you to sort of tap into the sense of, betrayal that you feel with mobile. If the applicant had originally come with this garish mess of, 6 lines and like advertisements all over it and the Dunkin' Donuts sign, and their version of compromise was what they're now proposing, which is a couple lines, no extra branding, so to speak, would you feel less like they told you to pound sand?
I don't even know where to begin to answer that. I don't have any idea. Like,
Okay.
I don't have any idea. What I know is that we have a brand standard that is in conflict with the mobile brand standards. That I have expressed a willingness to depart from my brand standard in some way, and mobile has not. So,
I guess what I'm saying
this
is
is
to
the
some
brand, the
extent-
zoning code is the brand standard.
Well,
This was set by town meeting.
To some extent, the
I
reason-
didn't set this.
Right, I understand, but the way, I'm perhaps not asking this elegantly, but, Ms. McIntyre went through a line of questioning of like, are there gonna be all these lines? Are there gonna be these other things on here that like look pretty awful? And to some extent, because that is what their branding documents say should be there. So to some extent, they have adjusted their branding a bit to match our expectations. They have tried to find a way to make it smaller than their usual branding guidelines give them. So they have done something. It is not what you wanted. It is not enough in your view, but it is not nothing.
I would suggest if they had come, then, there's no way to rewrite history, Mike. I think that we get that. So I don't have any reason to expect that mobile has departed from any of its brand standards because it has submitted an application in accordance with what I hear in accordance with brand standards that it doesn't want to depart from. So mobile has come to the table with a take it or leave it. Why should anybody listen to somebody who says take it or leave it?
But what I worry about though with that approach is that what we are basically instructing applicants to do is to come up with the most hideous design that they can possibly imagine for the first meeting, and then back it off later.
That's the game. That's no secret.
Right, but
they're
they
not
did
blowing
not.
the lid off
and
anything
to some
there.
extent, they did not do that. They did not play that game, perhaps correctly.
They very well may have.
But I mean,
Mobile's
you're
been around
worried
a lot
about
longer than I
perverse
have.
incentive.
Mobile has been in front of thousands of boards before. Mobile knows exactly how this is played. Mobile has known exactly what the outcomes could be. There's nobody that can convince me otherwise. I'm not suggesting that there's somebody sitting twirling their mustache in a back room smoking a cigar, but I am saying that they know exactly how this was going to go. And they knew that the final line is, be nice to my franchisee. And that plays to our heartstrings because we are a local board. We're speaking to a local applicant. Unfortunately, the local applicant is beholden to this behemoth who says, you are my pawn. You go in there, you take the arrows, you take the slings, you take the insults, come back to me with an internally illuminated sign. Or you get to keep the piece of junk that's out front. And I would suggest that it's not that choice. There's an awful lot of ground in between. It can be a swell, new, perfectly conforming sign without the need for any of us to be taking our efforts in front of a microphone. There is not only one choice here, and I am not the only one making a choice here.
Can I make a motion to close the public discussion? We all have our minds made up. Let's move this along. It's 8:30. Let's move on. We can talk about this for the next hour. I think everybody on the board's mind is made up. We all know how we're going to vote. You're just talking and rehashing the same old thing. I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Wait, don't we have to ask
Aye.
the applicant?
All in
You
favor?
want us to close the public hearing?
Please,
Please, okay, thank you.
All in favor?
I mean, let's end this. Right, let's just end it.
All
Let's
in
kill it.
favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion made, second, and motion passes. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to grant the relief that the applicant requests. I make a motion to, the applicant is requesting a variance pursuant to Town of North Andover zoning bylaws, Section 195, 6.5A, to replace the existing sign with a similarly internally illuminated sign and electronic pricing board. A variance is requested under Section 195-6.5A, prohibitions of the bylaws. I make a motion to approve.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll. Mr. Fagan?
Favor.
Aye.
Kusia.
Yes.
Ms. McIntyre?
I'm struggling with this. Yes.
Ms. Jacobs?
Aye.
I'm a no. The motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much, guys.
appreciate your time very
Surprised
much.
at that? Just because,
Surprised, but I'm very happy.
just because it's already there.
I appreciate that very much, thank you.
Good luck, y'all.
Thank you.
Who got you your Cheerios today? No, you're amazing.
Next item on the agenda, we have the continued public hearing. Well, there are two that we're doing jointly. It is North Andover and Sutton Street Development, 1 Surrey Drive and 505 Sutton. Would y'all approach?
Listen, give me 5 more months, I'll buy you a drink.
Do it tonight.
I won't mind.
Oh, come on, it's not fair. Keep drinking out of me.
Wow. How come we never get out of it? This was gonna last till 10:30. And I don't even buy gas. I buy gas on 114.
Listen, I buy at A Prime.
Hey, Brian, that's on the record more than once. All right, let's carry on. If y'all could just introduce yourselves again, please.
Jean Enright, Interim Director of Community and Economic Development.
Eric Close from Info Development.
Thank you both. And we have, what paths have we traveled in the last month?
Doug, may I start?
Sure.
So, in representation from the proposed senior center, as you're aware, the hearing opened at the last meeting. There were a couple of items you requested for additional information. So in your packet today, I'm here along with Katie Martin from the engineering team. In your packet today, we submitted a rendering plan. Katie will review that with you. There's really just one minor modification. We included a full plan set as well, but the one modification will be shown on the rendering plan. You also received a matrix of programming at the senior center. There was some discussion as to what time people arrive, how many people typically come on a day, and does it compete with the commuting time? And so in this matrix, I asked the staff at the senior center to provide a typical week. And so what's detailed is programming for each day of the week and the amount of participants in that program. Does everybody have that? It looks like this. So on a typical week, Monday, this week came out to 113 people arrived, and you can see by time of day. They typically arrive just before their program. Some stay and socialize somewhat after, but not certainly for the entire day. The Tuesday totals 103, the Wednesday 122, Thursday 42, and Friday 111 participants in programming. The narrative to the lower right-hand column speaks to a busiest week. So I asked for a typical week and the busiest week, and you can say they align pretty well. So there's not significant variations in programming through the course of the year. That being said, there's about 7 people that just show up for support services, might see the nurse, might get accounting help, things like that. So there's some not accounted for, but it's minimal. It's 7 on a typical day. Some don't check in, so there may be 12 to 15 people that arrive for a certain reason and they actually swipe my senior center cards in order to get the programming statistics. And then there's some annual events like the crafts fair, a health fair, a holiday breakfast that obviously will bring more than this indicates, but those are isolated in the annual for the most part. So I think that speaks to just really the time of arrivals, the time of departures, and certainly not in conflict with commuting time for the most part. The other item we discussed, there was a conceptual plan shown last meeting. It really raised a lot of discussion. Actually, both of us indicated it was shown at town meeting. I have since watched town meeting. It was not displayed, but the former town manager did speak to the content of that plan. Go ahead.
Oh, no, please
Okay,
finish.
so he spoke to the content in that it was proposed to be 136 units, four-story building. Senior center was approximately 57,000 square feet of land, 13,500 square foot building, 80 dedicated parking spaces. And so the concept that was discussed narratively is consistent with what we're presenting. The plan, however, was shown at planning board meetings. So it certainly was in front of the public, it was in front of abutters, it was displayed as a conceptual plan. So I acknowledge that, too. And if Katie could just display the rendering.
So, good evening, Catherine Martin, from Belserine, Massachusetts, registered landscape architect, working on the site plan for the senior center. We did receive comment at the last hearing regarding how we exited onto Surrey Street, so we did look at the geometry of the exit, and we did add a little bit of a radial piece to it to give it a little bit of a swing, so we altered the geometry slightly so that when people exit, we're pushing them towards a right-hand turn to prevent left turns, along with the signage and the markings that are required at the exit onto Surrey Street. And that was the only change to this site plan since we were here last month.
And a fire truck analysis has been done, and so the geometry does suit their apparatus.
One of the things that I picked up after watching the town meeting twice is, you're right, that there was no image actually shown, that it was spoken to very minimally about what was being done, in the sense of there was no discussion of what the building was looking like, how many buildings we're talking about. One of the things that popped out to me that I feel is a huge difference from what you're looking at now, and I understand from town meeting, you guys had one idea in mind, and since then, things have shifted. But I still don't think that that changes the certain aspects of people being informed and what people did and didn't vote on. And one of the things that popped out the most to me was the town manager, because he was the one that did primarily all of the talking regarding this project, was that the building that the senior center was going to be on was going to have 80 dedicated spots, and that piece of land was being donated. That is not actually what's happening. So now you guys are actually only donating the building and leasing the parking. So the plot of land, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the piece of land that's going to have the senior center will be donated. The additional piece of land you guys have purchased in the redesign of all of this is going to be leased.
That's right.
How long is that lease? Do you guys have like an outline of terms, or is it still totally up in the air?
I'm not sure totally of the year, but there's been internal discussions on it. The zoning bylaw does have a provision that allows off-site parking as long as a lease agreement is in place, so that will be conditioned through the special permit process.
Right, I guess my question is, like, if this agreement is 5 years, I can imagine, like, this board being a lot more nervous about that than if it's 45 years, right?
I think we've discussed with town council at least 20 years, and also with rights to renew and then right to purchase at any time. So for us, what we've discussed with the town, what we've offered is, we're probably just going to finance that lot separately with a local bank, and as long as they just cover our cost. So to your point, Ms. Jacobs, we're still donating the 57,000 square feet of land to the town as per the plan. However, when they, I think we discussed a little bit last time, and maybe at planning as well, when they decided they needed a different layout and they needed more land, we went and got the extra lot. So it wasn't, we said, gee, now we're only going to give you half as much, and now you have to pay for half. It just, as it evolved, it was, all right, we'll still give you the same amount, but we can't afford to buy another one and give it to you, but we can afford to just have you cover the cost, or you can buy it, or.
And I understand that. I think one of the big things is watching town meeting, very little emphasis was put on the zoning changes that were needed for this project, and a lot of focus and excitement was put on the senior center.
Right.
And one of the biggest things that was mentioned repeatedly time and time and time and time and time again was this magnificent, unheard of donation that you're not finding anywhere that's being given to the town. And that, I think, for many people was a big, aside from needing a bigger senior center and all of that that came with it, the donation aspect was a big thing because it was mentioned repeatedly, being donated, being donated, being donated. So that, to me, stuck out in people's minds. Now I see that that's shifting. And I guess I sit here and say, you know, are people going to vote differently if it's now not a fully donated parcel of land? And I understand the problem that you guys entered. I get it. But I guess that becomes a question in my mind. Because now I sit here and say, what if, and I'm not asking for, you know, the discussions, but if it's a lease and at the end of the day, you know, it becomes the issue of, okay, well, if you want to buy it now after 40 years, it's $300,000. Well, what happens if you don't buy it? I mean, the town is in many ways stuck in the situation of they wouldn't have a choice but to either continue a lease or purchase the land. Because if they say no to a lease and they say no to a purchase, you have a senior center with no parking.
Right, so that doesn't make any, that doesn't make any sense. I think what we've shown the town was, basically, we bought it for $600,000 and showed an amortization schedule. So say they wanted to start off with a 20-year lease, they're basically paying the bank, whether through us or directly. And so if you got out in year 5 and you've amortized $100,000 and they said, gee, town's doing well, Amazon's paying all these taxes, we'll just buy it. So they can look up and say, all right, now we've paid it down to $500,000. We don't want to make anything on it, we just want to cover our costs on it. So yeah, you're right, 10 years later it might be 300, 200, 100. And after 20 years, you basically own it because you've paid it off. So we're not looking for anything at that point. So I guess the problem we have is the town would have to go back to town meeting to vote to either buy it or accept it at that point, right?
Well, and I think to add to it, the town meeting, because I found this out, the town meeting for 2018 had 387 votes in a population of a little over 31,000. I don't do math. I actually took the time to do the math. That's 0.012% of people were at this town meeting. And I think a big part of that was because if you look at the warrants, there wasn't anything that popped out along the lines of what we dealt with when we were dealing with Amazon or the marijuana or any of the other things that brought in town meetings that had overflows. So that became another factor, which I understand is outside of your control, but that's one of the things that came across when you actually look at the warrants on such a itsy-bitsy tiny little beanie town meeting.
But I guess that's part of the process, right? So as town meetings, warrants get out, and there's all kinds of hearings and discussion, and if you have interest and you want your vote, you're obligated to show up. And in this, it was the same process. It went through all kinds of planning board hearings for zoning changes. It was a public process, and that is how many people showed up, and I believe that's typical. I know lately we've had much more controversial town meetings, and we've had really peak attendance at them. But again, I'll just point that in the zoning bylaw, this provision, it can't be constructed unless a lease agreement is in place that would support the use. So
Right, but the lease could be 40 years, right?
I don't believe it can. I believe it can be up to 20.
Okay, so the lease could be up to 20 years. And after 20 years, you're either having to renew for 20 or purchasing.
So just, not to interrupt, but just to add, you said you paid $600,000, and you mentioned the amortization schedule. How many years is the loan?
So I think we'll probably go put a new loan on it right now, because right now we have a combined loan with the properties next door. So I think we'll break it off and go to North Mark or Lowell 5 or somebody, and I think we'd probably work with the town if it's initial 20-year loan lease. We want to make the loan coterminous with the lease. So like I said, if we get out 20 years and you lease it for 20 years, essentially don't give it for $1. You bought it at that point, in our minds. I wouldn't see then us saying, oh gee, it's another. I think we need to write that,
Yeah.
you know, in the agreement.
I mean, that just becomes one of my very big concerns on this, because I think that is a huge change. And like I say, I understand it wasn't a foreseen change, but I also sit here and look, and God, I hope nothing happens to you or your company, but you can't control what happens 15 years from now.
It's got to be documented, yeah, it's got to.
It does, but I mean, your full intentions, because obviously you're putting all of this and doing all of this because you obviously truly care about North Andover. That doesn't mean that's going to be the position of somebody else who, if your business were to be sold or if you were to pass,
Sure.
when that lease is up, your intentions in 20 years may be the exact same. Whoever comes after you may not. So I also get concerned about where do we look after the 20-year lease.
Who's to maintain it?
So the 20-year lease would end with, as Eric said, that it would be paid for, the whole thing would be paid for. So that amortization gets you to a 20-year period where it's fully paid.
But now, does that not change that it's not donated? I mean, and I know it's a, you know,
It's a lease to own?
but that's not what was voted on.
Yeah, but I think he said the magic words. At the end of the 20 years,
Right,
he
but-
would deed the land to the town for $1.
Right.
Except
But that would
for,
have to be in writing.
I think
Right.
whether it's a
Right, that would
reverter
have to be in
clause or
writing. And that
whatever
would
you
be
want.
guaranteed.
except for, hold on, that then means over 20 years, the people of North Andover paid $600,000 for this piece of property
So it's really
that
not a
we were,
gift.
that we were told was donated.
Right. So I'm answering your question. So it really wasn't a gift.
Right. And does that
And
change?
the town is really paying for $600,000 for the land.
But the land that was committed to be donated will be donated, the whole 57,000 square feet.
What do you do with a piece of land without parking?
So the progression of this was the 80 dedicated parking spaces was really important. And as, again, we moved from conceptual to design, there was a lot of iterations. And the decision to purchase that was conversations with town council and the town manager, and it was just, it made for the right site. And so,
And I understand all of that, but I think there's a big difference when you have the town manager getting up at town meeting and telling people who are there that this is what we're getting. We're getting these two things, and now we're essentially not getting those two things. And I understand why it was done, but I think that matters. If this process had to go, if this had to go in front of town meeting to begin with, I don't see how you change it, even if the changes were unforeseen and not something you even thought of. Change it to that difference and it not have to go back in front of town meeting.
Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The town council's told us that they could sign leases without going back to town meeting. They cannot buy property, they cannot accept a donation of property, but they can sign leases.
But you've now told the people of North Andover they are getting a senior center, and according to Mr. Mailer, and 80 dedicated parking spaces. We are not getting that, because that is not what's being donated. That's where I guess my issue comes, because you're right, town council, I'm going to assume, is much more educated on that aspect than I am. But I think there's a difference on what we tell people and what they're voting on and what they think they're getting and what they're supporting to what they're not. So,
Can
I'll
I-
shut up on that subject now.
Can you enlighten me? Okay, because I'm a little confused, and I think you're on the right track. Okay, at town meeting, they were gonna give the land for the senior center to be built to the town.
The town.
However, it was
well,
minus the parking places?
No. They were donating the land for, and I don't remember what the square footage was. It was different square
Whatever
footage.
the number is.
But they were doing the building, the land for the building,
Yeah.
and 80 dedicated parking spaces
Okay.
is what was being donated. A
Right.
chunk of land that was
But
going to have that.
That included 80 parking places?
Yeah,
Correct.
the idea is that the senior center plus the parking for it would be included in that original plot of land. So
Okay,
the
right.
square footage is that was being donated in town meeting and is being donated now is the same. But we are not fitting 80 parking spaces in that space. And so now that's why there's this other property.
So now, the 80 parking places, quote, has disappeared?
For
In
all
its
intents and
place.
purposes, yes.
And in its places, how many parking places?
Well, how many is on that one, how many
Mm-hmm.
parking places is on the lot that has the building? Do we know? I'm not gonna actually ask somebody to count, but are we talking like 20?
So I'll just show you, the property line is right here, so.
So you don't have,
So approximately, I would say about 20, so
Yeah, that sounds about right.
61 on the other side, approximately.
okay, that's fine, I don't need exact numbers. So 61 pieces of land, 61 parking spaces is not going to be included, which is,
Included with the property,
correct, which is what was
as was approved by town meeting.
correct.
Right, okay.
And the reason being?
Because because what happened, because they had, this one idea in mind, but then when they got into, and I appreciate the problem you're in. When they realized that the design they had was an older design, they had to change it. And the changes they make, I agree, function better for a senior center. But they realized that making those changes meant they had to take away parking. And the only way to get parking was to purchase another piece of land.
I
So
understand.
after town meeting, they purchased the other piece. So the additional piece that they've purchased is literally just for parking. But,
To accommodate what they wanted to present.
correct.
Right.
So we had, again, there's many iterations. I think the highest we got to staying within that 57,000 square feet was approximately 58 parking spaces. And we just didn't feel that was sufficient, so we wanted to get to 80. It was all discussed internally, and how to get to 80. This is what got us to 80. That's,
So just along with the incremental lot for the parking, concurrently, the senior center building grew almost by a third in size, from about 9,800 square feet to 15, I'm just speaking from memory now. I mean, so the original building, senior center building, is a larger building, as well as there's a parking need, is that correct?
I do know that there was a document that showed the 9,800. There were also documents that showed the 13, so I don't know which one was the original.
I'm almost positive that the larger version is the one that's right here.
Yeah.
So Eric,
It
what's the
was-
answer? What's
He
the
doesn't
answer?
know.
I mean, I understand. I didn't fully understand it until she explained it, and she did an excellent job in doing that. Okay,
So
I get it,
Thank
but
you,
what's
'cause
the
I'm quite
answer?
tired.
So it was
Okay,
really,
how can we make this work?
it was really working with Gene and Andrew Mailer and Eric Kafori at the time, when we originally had, it was more of a long
But
linear
those two
building.
people aren't here now.
Yeah, no, I know.
They're not
But
here now. So how do we make it
fit
work?
at the time, doesn't fit now, so we felt
Right.
lucky that we could go get that extra lot that wasn't part of the plan.
Right,
Couldn't,
yeah.
it wasn't like we said, hey, let's, it was kind of a collaborative with the people that aren't here anymore, and Gene. So we said, we'll lease it for cost. We don't want to make it go. We want to do our project and help get the senior center done. So we're still donating everything we said we would, and I agree with you. If we had known at the time, we would have said at the time, and by the way, you'll have to lease the lot next door because we can't afford to give it. And I think that the people at that meeting, even though it was only 387 voters and I was one of them, I think they still would have overwhelmingly approved because it was such a positive reaction to getting a new senior center. I mean, you don't know. But in the overall cost of the senior center being, multiple millions of dollars versus, a lease of, $3,000 a month.
Okay, so can I ask a question? If we were to put in an approximate, I'm not looking for exact numbers, the value of the land that we're talking about, the total value of the land that was going to be donated in addition to the extra lot that was purchased, what do you think that land value is?
So it's an acre and a half of what was general business zone is now B2 zone. That's $850, $1 million.
Okay, so you want the town to take a loan on 600,000 on something that's worth $1 million?
No, I'm sorry.
I mean,
The piece that we're
Is that the numbers I'm hearing?
No, I'm sorry. The piece that we're donating,
Yeah.
we're donating essentially an acre and a half
Right.
of B2 zone land. I think it's probably worth close to $1 million.
Okay.
And then we're going to knock down the 2 houses that are there, do some planning, do some site work. We're going to clear the lot, take the houses out, fill the holes up in lifts, compact, get it, basically make it site pad ready. So there's some extra couple $100,000 cost there. So we're probably donating at least $1 million worth of land and work.
So what the town is basically going to be on the hook for is the additional 2 lots that you're buying to
additional
make it
one.
work.
One.
Excuse me, one more that makes it work.
Yes.
Am I grabbing that right?
Right, so we
Okay,
think
the
we're
original
probably,
donation is there, but you had to purchase additional land to make it all symmetrical and work.
Exactly.
And that wasn't in the original plan, and now you're coming back and you're asking the town to pay for that extra lot that you had to buy.
Right, exactly. You got it.
Well,
Am
it's
I
not,
getting it right?
it's not something that's going in front of town meeting, but
Yeah, that
he's
wasn't put
talking
in
to-
front of town, yeah, but things change. Okay, right, things change, okay, but the basic intent is the majority of the land value is still being donated.
right.
And in order for it to work, the town is being on the hook for the additional land that makes it all come together, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
you're right.
So, and I understand, that's not what was
You
in
know,
front of town meeting.
listen, I'll donate you the car. I'll lease you the engine.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I may have missed some, but was there originally a plan that had the senior center and the parking on the one lot?
The conceptual plan showed the parking really between the two buildings and this dashed line that like literally went through some of the islands. So it wasn't, conceptually, it was going to be dedicated, but it wasn't shown as being dedicated by any means. There was,
So,
Yeah, there's the old, you want to take a quick look at this map? See how this senior center, and if their architect was here, GovCAM, he very eloquently explained why this layout doesn't work, because you can't drop people off the wrong side of the car and all sorts of stuff, not access going out. But look at that building, the way it lays out compared to this one.
yeah, no, I get it.
So-
You're still using the
So
same
you had
lane.
a concept that might have worked, but you wanted to improve it.
right, it was a
You
concept.
had a concept.
I understand they don't design senior centers.
So, can I ask you a
We've never
question?
built the senior
If
centers.
we
didn't
accept
know.
this,
Yeah, no,
are we
yeah,
putting
so-
the town on the hook
Whoever comes with
Yes.
for that note?
Well, no, but then,
There's still a business
Yeah.
deal to be made. There's still a business deal to be made between the town and the applicant.
Yeah, but-
All
okay.
we are doing is offering the entitlement stage. We're not on the.
Oh, okay,
we're not on
okay,
the
we're not
business
all
end.
putting the town on
No.
the hook to fight, okay.
And if that business agreement doesn't come into play, then it can't be constructed.
Yeah, we can forbid them from moving forward, but we can't force them.
well, not really, because they can do a lot without us.
As of right. You can do anything as of right.
Yes.
Ms. Jacobs.
Yes.
Signage too.
Signage too, baby, signage too.
But I'm pretty sure that they cannot turn that lot into a parking area without our variance.
Without a special permit.
Like strictly speaking.
Special permit.
Without our special permit. So like they cannot do that part. I mean, they can move everything else around, they can build lots of apartments, but they can't turn that space into a parking lot without our special permit.
There are some things they need us for, if they want to go about it this way.
So I just want to ask, I just need to clarify where the risk is, Lisa. Is the risk that the parking will be pulled away and the lot used for another purpose? Is the risk that it wasn't voted on at town meeting, so the town is incurring another financial obligation? Where do you see the biggest problems here?
Well, I think there's a few things, and I don't necessarily know if I would say it's the biggest risk, but I think if we are going to tell the citizens of North Andover that you have the right, we're a town, to make this vote and make this decision, I truly think that it needs to be the whole kit and caboodle shown to them. And listen, I could be 100% wrong. I'm not one of the people that was there. I'm not one of the people that voted. I'm not a senior. For all I know, everybody that was there could turn around and say, I don't care if there's a lease involved. We're still getting a huge chunk of land for free. That's great. Who cares about that? But then there could be other people who sit here and say, wait a minute, didn't we vote, and now what we voted on, and this comes down to principle. You don't sit here and say to people, you vote and make a decision. Ellen, I'm learning from you. Make a decision and then turn around and change that behind our backs. And I'm not saying that that's what you did. I'm like intentionally, you know what I'm saying? But I think you don't sit here and give this perception of you vote, you make the decision, and then change what they voted. Because when somebody is told, again, it's like me saying to Alan, yeah, I'll donate you the car. Oh, I forgot to tell you I'm leasing you the engine. That's not right.
Right.
That's the first thing. As for a business deal, we're not involved in the business aspect. If those in town hall want to sit here and enter into a $1 million lease agreement with them, that's on them. They have the right to do that outside of town meeting.
Okay.
Would I say it's a wise decision? No. But I think a lot of it comes down, first and foremost, it's principle. You can't sit here and say one thing and do another.
So what you're saying then, to make this deal kosher, this theoretically would have to go in front of town meeting again?
I think, well, I will say, I think
To
it
make it
needs to
kosher.
go back in front of town meeting again, yeah.
Right. As to the plan as it is today.
The plan,
So
as
the
if
town
this,
could-
if
so
this
that
is the
people could
plan,
vote on what they're presented to us.
if this is the plan they want to go with, which,
Mm-hmm.
and he's right, the guy who was here, whose name I can't remember, who designed the senior center, beautiful reasons for why this one is far better and superior than the original one. They don't design senior centers, so you can't put that on them. But if this is what they're going with, then yes, I think they need to present this to the town.
To the town meeting.
Yeah.
For their approval again, because it's changed so drastically.
Because I think there's listen, people might not sit here and think that $600,000 is a huge chunk of money, but if you look at the budget and you look at where money's being spent left and right, $600,000 can be something that people find significant. I mean, it's not chump change.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's, yeah, I think that needs to go that way, in the sense of being presented to them exactly how it's going to be done. I won't touch upon the fact that absolutely no rendering was provided at town meeting irks me a little. That's a different thing. But that's, yeah, I think that's the only way really to make it right, unfortunately. Which I know sucks, because then it pushes you guys back.
Eric, what do you say to that?
Already waited 2 years. Yeah, it's tough. I don't think, we really don't want to do that. We don't want to go. And I know what you're saying, $600,000 is a good chunk of money. In a $100 million budget, it's probably 35 grand a year. And the town, maybe the town decides in another year, yeah, let's go get a vote and ask if we can buy it.
And
Right.
that could very well be the case.
We don't want to slow down because we'll miss another year and have another year of construction cost increases and so forth and so on.
Now, what's the planning board have to say about it?
Planning board as far as that.
How's your opinion? You represent the planning board?
I don't represent the planning board, but I've been part of all these discussions. Again, going back to the former town manager, this started in January, I think, and so from there to now, town council, the new town manager, everybody's been involved with this. The selectmen have been made aware that we would have to enter into a lease agreement. There's provisions in the bylaw that says it can't be constructed unless that lease is in place for the life of the use. And so it's not as if they could just take it away. There'd be a contractual agreement that says for the life of the use.
But you just said a lease agreement can't be more than 20 years, so how can it be the life of the use but not be more than 20 years? The life of the use of what? The senior center?
Of the parking.
Of the park. But a lease can't be more than 20 years.
Without going to town meeting. So something would have to go to town meeting, whether it's to purchase it or to lease longer than that. That's my understanding.
So, see if I have this right. What was approved at town meeting, for lack of my vocabulary, was a freebie. And now it's not gonna be a freebie, because they've purchased the extra land, and the town is gonna be on the hook for $600,000.
If that's what they end up, and again, I'm not asking for business dealings, if that is the agreement.
But this was not presented to town meeting.
Correct.
This is not the freebie now.
Correct.
I still think it's a good deal.
I'm not saying it's not a bad deal.
It's still a good deal.
I'm not saying
But
it's
it's
not.
not what town meeting voted on.
Right, and I think that's kind of,
It's still an excellent deal, Larry.
and I'm not saying, and listen, I wish town meeting was 2 months from now.
Right, likewise.
And I guess I just sit here and start saying, and not that we set precedents, because we don't necessarily set a precedent. But
You illuminated sign there?
no, his is external. That kind of makes a difference to me. As much as I know that sucks.
Yeah, let me ask you, but what I'm hearing is that, and I understand what you're saying, that this doesn't seem quite above board, right? Even though I know there's no ill intent, right? But the town does have the ability to enter into leases.
Yep.
The town has entered into leases before without going before town meeting.
I'm
Well,
sure.
it's something they can do, so.
Right, so why then does that become our purview?
Because my problem becomes you cannot present to the citizens of this town
understand.
that they are getting a building and.
A freebie.
And listen,
A
I
freebie.
watched town meeting twice because I wasn't there. I took the time to watch it twice to catch all of this because I wanted to come in here fully educated and know my stuff. And the former town manager said the building and 80 dedicated parking spots. That's not what, we're going to be donated, very graciously. But that's not what we're getting now.
Can I suggest something? Can we have town council here?
I don't think it matters, because at the end of the day.
Have her opinion
No.
about entering into a
No,
lease or
but
not?
I don't care about the
What
lease.
happened at town meeting about entering into a lease?
Well, but it might matter to Alan.
No. But what I'm
no.
saying is that how do you see?
I mean, I understand, like he says, it appears something underhanded is going on.
But, and I'm not saying, I don't
Okay,
want
and I'm
anybody
not saying that it was intended, okay? It's for the better. I get it.
It
I get
is,
But
but-
like she says, it's not what was approved at town meeting.
But even if town council turns around and says, yes, we can enter into leases, no, there's no price limit on what lease, how long and how much and what have you. No, it can't be more than 20 years. Even if she says all of those things, that's fabulous. I don't see how you undo.
I get it, I understand. I understand.
But I don't get it. I still understand what you're saying.
Because this is me saying to you, Ron, I will lease you the car, or I'll donate you the car. And then you come to pick up the car and I say, where's my check? And you go, what check? And I say, oh, I didn't tell you. I forgot to mention. And not in that aspect. I'm leasing you the engine. You're paying me for the engine. You're not going to turn around and be like, wait a minute, that's not what we agreed to. And again, people might not care. But at the end of the day, you can't have to present something, and it has to be presented to the town to take the land for donation. And they thought they were getting one thing, and they're not. That's what it is.
Right, but if it is within the town's purview to make this decision, understanding that it might come back to bite them from voters who say you spent $600,000 that we didn't authorize you to spend, but it's within the town's legal purview to make the least decision, right? Then why do we make the decision which says you pulled the wool over the eyes of people at town meeting and you go back and do it?
Because they didn't pull the wool over their eyes, because this wasn't something that was intended, it wasn't something that could be foreseen. I understand them doing what they did, I understand how the situation got created. And if planning board doesn't want to open up their mouths and see that there's a problem, that this isn't what was presented, and listen, we're on a board. It's just like every other board. It's just like Paul just dived into our wonderful pretty little rule book. And part of our pretty little rule book, okay, not necessarily this, but of the town, is if we're taking a donation, it has to go in front of town meeting. You cannot go in front of town meeting and say you are getting A and B, and everybody's excited about this and it's great, and then turn around 2 years later and say, oh, sorry, you're only getting A.
So, if I may throw out a...
It's the principle of it. It's the principle. I know, principle sucks, but it's the principle of it.
If I may throw out a different car metaphor, 'cause I feel like it's a little bit like someone donated a car, and then I looked at the car that was being donated and said, that's not big enough for my family. And then so then I go back to the dealership and say, can we do a bigger car? And we negotiate so that, like, I get a bigger car and I pay some of the money of that purchase price towards the bigger car. Because that's really what's happening here, is that a lot of what changed was the demands of the town, not just the demand. It wasn't just like the developer being like, oops, we made a mistake. It was the town said we need like certain things that we thought we could fit in this property.
That's not totally what it is. It was actually more so the guy who actually has a living building senior centers said, if you really want this to function and be functional for seniors, this is how you need to do it.
But the town hired that person in order to fulfill like our needs. Now, we have a town structure that, none of us probably in this room voted to implement the structure of government that we have here, but it was decided by the community, and we give the town manager powers to be able to make changes and negotiations because that is the government we want.
But no, because part of our town, part of the rules, is that if land is to be donated, it has to go in front of town meeting. It is not something that can be done by the Board of Selectmen. It is not something that can be done by town manager, town council, any other wonderful person in the government of North Andover. It has to be done by the citizens.
Absolutely, but land is not donated by parking spots. Land is donated by square feet, and is donated by physical positions in the ground, and that land is still being donated.
You do not turn around and tell people that they are getting a building and 80 parking spots donated to them and then take that out from under them. You do not do it. That is not what you're doing. That you can't do that. You can't do it to people.
Is there a plan on the original, the single lot, not the second add-on lot? Is there a plan on that single lot that ever showed a building with 80 parking spaces?
No, because at town meeting, well, I don't know about the first rendering they showed. At town meeting, in the book or on display, there was never a rendering, period. The only thing that was discussed regarding the actual senior center was, I think, maybe he mentioned the square footage. I can't be 100% on that. But he specifically said enough land for the senior center, 80 parking spaces would be dedicated. And yes, he did add in that the owner was going to make it site prepared ready. So
if you look on here, there are 80 spaces noted.
And I don't even know, because if you recall from last meeting, they were talking about this being shared space, shared parking with
Correct.
the residents and the
Over
senior
here.
center.
Correct.
So I don't even know if that rendering would have flown in the sense of what was actually said at town meeting, because again, there were no renderings and there was nobody but town manager speaking.
But they're sharing that with the apartments.
Correct, they're
Yeah.
sharing this
Right,
portion.
right, they're sharing that
Right.
with the apartments, right?
So that's fine.
Yeah, I understand.
So, are you counting?
Yeah, this 80 spaces.
This is 80?
Yes. I can't assume, but I'm thinking.
Well,
Because
what
this
do
is certainly
we do?
not 80 right there. So, I mean, for me, it's hard to understand how you can, and again, this is everything that sometimes that is frustrating with this town, is everything gets rushed and pushed for town meeting, that I wish this had gone to the professional saying, okay, that senior center's not gonna work. Let's try to do this, and let's try to have this solved and this presented prior to town meeting. And again, like you said, 2 more months would have been great. So this doesn't happen. And again, it's like with a good portion of the projects, Lucent, coming to town meeting, the bigger projects come to town meeting. And it's frustrating as a town to have that happen. And I get it.
And I don't mean to be the thorn in the side, and I know you guys have spent time on this project, and I know this wasn't something foreseen, but I can't stand by that. And if I'm wrong, listen, I will get down on my knees and say, I am sorry, you're right, everybody didn't care about not getting all of it.
Can I say something? I want to thank you for informing me. You did an excellent job.
Thank you, I actually put a lot of time into this.
No. When you're right, you're right.
Snacking.
When it's good, it's good. I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
You're gonna do the cuddle session then, aren't you? The cuddles.
I want to do bingo.
I wanna do cuddles.
I can't get close to her, she's pregnant.
I like the belly being rubbed. So that's where I stand, I will now,
But isn't that the selectmen's role?
No.
Versus,
no.
are we looking at setbacks?
But the provisions are in place, and we're not operating outside of any provisions that are allowed, whether it's the Board of Selectmen entering into a lease agreement, or the planning board is making sure contractually there's an agreement in place that would allow for the use for a certain period of time. Great, in hindsight, I agree. If it was all locked up, town meeting, I agree, but we're not operating outside of parameters that are in a place to allow us to move forward. So, move forward in terms of coming to you and planning for approvals.
So I don't know how it would be locked up at town meeting, because I don't think the town would be in a position to spend the money on their architect in advance, not even knowing if it's gonna be approved. It would be
Town
wasted
meeting,
money.
Right.
And
You have
listen-
to know you have a project before the town's gonna commit money.
And I get it, it sucks. I'm not saying it doesn't, and I
But we have,
wish-
but we have a board in town that has this responsibility, and it's not us, it's the zone, it's the selectmen.
No, but
They have the authority to do this sort of
And
thing.
they are elected.
And they're elected, and it's in the town charter.
And-
So
and the
I
funds
think
were
it's their
approved.
responsibility.
So
And
then you are 100% okay standing behind that the people of the town of North Andover were told they were getting something, and now they're not getting it.
people in
Yeah,
town,
no.
the
It's a yes
people
or
in
no.
town of North
It's a
Andover,
yes or no. No, it's a yes or
just
no.
like the people in town of North Andover may or may not show up for town meeting and vote, they also have the right to vote for their selectmen who represent them.
But that's
And that's
completely
within their
different.
and that's
because
within their charter.
The selectmen has nothing to do with accepting donated land. So I go back to my question. You are 100% okay standing behind telling the people of town of North Andover that they are getting one thing, and then they're not getting it.
I don't
Yes or
think
no?
that's what happened. I am okay with what is being proposed,
Okay.
but I do not agree with your assessment of what's happening.
I'm not saying I'm opposed to this. What I'm saying is I don't like how it went about in
How
the
it's
sense.
presented.
And it's, and I
Is that
can't.
the proper word? How it's being presented?
N-
Because it's
yes-
an excellent idea.
no, yes and
It's
no,
just the
be-
way it's coming out.
Yes and no, because saying the way it was presented makes it look, I feel like that's presenting it as if they knew the disaster they were creating. And I don't believe that's what happened. I truly believe they weren't going to dish out a bunch of money on something they didn't know they had or not. So they threw together what they thought were going to work. I get it. And then they found out it wasn't going to work. And now, so no, it was the way the events went.
Right, so I'll answer your question. The answer is yes. And the reason is that I would rather see it done right than done poorly.
Absolutely.
I think that a rather sizable accommodation was made so that it could be done properly. That is, I'll echo what Frank said, is within the purview of the town to enter into these kind of lease agreements where that is the consideration, it's not a zoning consideration. So in this case, while I understand the approach, I don't think it's totally germane to what this board is supposed to do.
But the people.
I think that the Board of Selectmen should be informed that if we vote for this, that we would need their okay to enter into this finance agreement.
But I don't think that's what the Board of Selectmen do and don't do, and whatever the
Yeah, but now
cost
I
of
agree
it
with
is.
him. The Board of Selectmen have been put in place to run the matters of the town.
Right,
Okay?
except
So
for-
they're given responsibility. As part of that responsibility
But-
is entering into this financial agreement. I mean, that I can say. But you don't want to blindside the Board of Selectmen. We should be upfront with them.
But what if the town, what if the people,
Right?
Yeah, they've
Well, I
been,
mean,
they've been
they
involved.
have to approve the lease. We are not approving the lease.
Yeah, but I think this should all be in place before all of this
But-
comes here.
but what if the people of North Andover were going to be looking at the insane amount of money that's already being spent out of North Andover for the rec center and for this and that, and sit here and say, well, no, we don't want to pay 600, and listen, 600
Yeah,
might not
but
actually.
now the Board of Selectmen are representing the people, and that's what they're elected for.
Oh,
So is
you
there
want to
any,
put
is
all?
there anyone here from the opposing this, or are there any neighbors here? Did anyone go to planning board? I mean, this is our second meeting here.
Yeah.
Been
So-
to every planning board.
I was going to say there were a bunch of
So-
people at
yes.
planning board.
So people, I mean,
They've been through town meeting process as well. Very active.
Realistically, I might have mentioned
Yeah,
last time,
step to the podium, please.
no, I was just, I don't,
But, I mean, we might as well change the room a little bit maybe and have them talk for a little bit.
I'll shut up. I'm done.
well, I was just going to mention, if we had made a few changes to the plan to make it, I think in all of our minds, a worse plan, we wouldn't be here. We would have just gone through planning board. So I agree with you. I wish it had evolved in a little bit different way. I wish we had known. I wish the town had put the money up front to hire the architect to tell us that we were kind of going down the wrong path. But that being said, I guess I agree with Mr. Fagan that you're not necessarily the gatekeepers to the process where everybody else is, because we could have actually not been here at all. But I think it's, now we're here because we want to make it right.
To make it better.
We created this internal lot line and created our own hardship, as you said last time, which is true. But only because we want to carve off and give the land to the town. So that's why we're here in front of you, and I agree with you. I wish it had evolved a little bit differently, but
but you understand what it's perceived as, what it looks like, oh, we're here after, oh,
yeah, yep, absolutely.
Especially when you hear all the backhanded deals that go on in government.
Would you like to hear what we've done since we've been here last time?
Sure. I mean, I'm done.
So I brought our civil engineer, who's kind of been spearheading a lot of the work for us, and our architect. I don't think you had an opportunity to hear from the architect last time, if you want to, about why the buildings were designed the way they were, why they're placed the way they were. But just to give you a little background also, we did do a site walk with the other board in
Yeah,
town.
planning got that and we didn't.
Do you want a site walk?
You know, when I
They
saw
requested a site-
when I saw that on planning, I was a little bit insulted that, that wasn't even thought to be offered to us.
I will tell you, it's all poison ivy and ticks, but we will go out there again.
I don't think it was offered, but they did request it.
And a number of the neighbors were there as well. So we did do a sidewalk, but we were trying to figure out, there are a lot of trees behind the site between us and the neighbors, and trying to figure out which ones we think can stay and which can go. And some of them we may not know 100% until we get out there. And then we looked at some of the ones along the street. Let's see what else. We have some minor revisions to the architecture. The landscape buffer around the edge of the project, I think we submitted to the board. There's been some changes there. And then we also picked up, we had done a traffic report. I know that's really the planning board's purview, but we'd done a traffic report on our site. The town wasn't going to hire a traffic engineer for the senior center itself. They were going to ask for a waiver, I believe. But we were asked to pick up and do the numbers for Surrey Drive and for the senior center itself. So we've done that as well. It's been given to TEC to do peer review, and they've given us some comments back. And I know the planning board will pick that up at their next meeting as well. So that's just some of what's been going on. Scott can probably give you a quick overview of some of the changes. And if you want to hear from the architect and I know it's getting late, if you want to hear a couple minutes of his mindset of why he designed to place the buildings, we're happy to do that too.
No, it's your rodeo.
I'll be brief. Sarah did cover a lot of it. Good evening, Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group. Thanks for having us today. There's a lot of great conversation. I appreciate the board for going through it. I think it's important from my perspective, and I hear the comment about perception, if things were to go forward here and whatnot. Every community has different boards and committees and town meetings or city councils, and they all operate in a similar function in Massachusetts, with the exception of Boston. This town not being any different. As a zoning board, we're here tonight to ask the board, speaking for our petition, for a few variances. On the other one, a special permit for parking and some other variances really associated with parking. The planning board, which is the other board we're before right now concurrently, is going to be looking at the project from a planning land use perspective and a technical perspective. We're going through that process with them right now, and I'll detail that. We're also before the Conservation Commission, who's looking out for the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act and the North Andover Wetlands bylaw. The project did also go to town meeting. You've watched it. And the town meeting body voted on a concept, a vision of having a senior center at this site made possible by the donation of land that is ready for construction, not having to demo houses, not having to strip loam. This is a pad-ready site, ready to start construction. And yes, during the course of that process, as we took the leap over 2 years through town meeting and going from the 164-unit project to the senior center, acquiring the land, from my perspective, being involved with this project, we got to a point where we did see a better project coming forward that fit in the same spirit and vision that was presented originally, still with the land being donated. And there's the addition of this parcel through a very inexpensive lease that Minka was subsidizing the initial cash up front to purchase to get this done and get that superb project. My humble opinion, I don't think this has been very transparent. This has been very forthcoming. We have made great efforts, and we're here before you all tonight, as Eric said, because we think this is a better product. Because we think this is a better project, and we feel, for the community as well, this is a vast improvement over what could have been. And there's been great efforts put forth by my client, Sutton Street Redevelopment, to help get that here. So that's my little retort on that. What I need to present to you, is that we are going through the planning board process. The board did request, and we did have a site walk with the board. Actually, many of the members of the neighborhood also came out on that site walk, and we took them around through the poison ivy and the ticks and whatnot out there. And I think we'd be happy to do that with all of you if that is your wish.
Well, when you advertise it like that.
I'll have to give you the same disclaimer I gave the board as well. So, But so where are we with the process? We did receive a peer review from TEC on more of the site layout perspectives. We received a peer review from Horsley Witten on the stormwater management perspective of the project. Just yesterday, we received a second letter from TEC more on the traffic side of it, which did have some site-related comments. We will be submitting tomorrow the response to all those comments. They haven't seen them yet, but I'm happy to report that we made no changes to the plan with respect to what you're seeing as far as the layout and the buildings. The changes were technical in nature, really clarifying underground utility systems and documenting compliance with certain standards, providing more information and evidence, whatnot. We did also run a fire truck analysis, and that's part of the package, demonstrate that the truck can turn around the site safely. So we're going through that process. And some of the information that you did receive on the 31st, I believe, or right around that time frame, we submitted the A&R plan that was endorsed by the planning board. So it effectively memorializes the line that was approved at town meeting for 57,000 square feet of land. So that action was taken, and that plan is in your packet. We submitted also a profile, which is kind of, it was working when we submitted it. It's further along now, but there's a profile showing trees, and what that is effectively what the trees at planted height are, and then what the trees would be in a 5-year horizon looking forward. The reason we submitted that was because a lot of the emphasis of the planning board is looking at the rear of the site and the interface with the neighborhood. We spent a lot of the site walk out in that area, looking at existing trees, and the planning board is on it from that perspective. I also included the preliminary landscape plan, which illustrates the buffering. What this plan is illustrating, the trees throughout the back of the property here are relatively sparse on the property itself. A lot of what you see with the vegetation is low-lying brush that's grown up tall, but it's brush. Bushes and weeds and things that have grown in. So in between the trees, we've pulled back the limit of work in order the property line 15 to 20 feet. We are mapping out trees that we can save. And what this plan is illustrating is how we're going to infill. All these trees are tall with canopies up high. They don't really do much to screen a buffer at all. So how do we address that? We infill it with evergreen plantings and other plantings that we would get in there and put in between the trunks and the mature trees. So that's another process that's ongoing with the planning board review under the site plan application, site plan review application. Rob Schaefer's here. We didn't get a chance to talk about the architectural drawings at the initial meeting. I'd love to give him a moment to talk about that a little bit. But we are in before you for 3 variances. The floor area ratio increased from allowed 0.75 to 1.2 on the property for the residential. Again, the massing for the entire real estate with all the property is 0.68. So, the project itself, including the senior center, complies. It's just because of the line put in at town meeting. We're requesting that floor area ratio variance. And then we're asking for the variance for the setback, mainly to the interior lot line. Again, it's the same lot line that was created at town meeting based on that concept. And we're asking for that because through the course of this design, again, an improvement that we feel is in the public interest is reducing the height of that building on the frontage. Rob will talk to that a little bit, but what we're preparing are documents and renderings and actually getting out and taking photos from the perspective of yards and second levels in the houses of what the building on the back lot line looks like. And what that will demonstrate is that a 3-story or 4-story building doesn't really matter back there. It's not going to look any different along that back interface, but what is important and where it will be noticeable is along the street frontage, where 3 stories to 4 stories would be noticeable to everybody coming into that entrance corridor, that gateway on Sutton Street. So, Rob, you have anything like that in the building?
Schaefer, R.H. Schaefer, Deloitte Architects. Back when we had the 165 floors, 3 units, we struggled with how are we going to get this all in there, how are we going to get the dumpster, how are we going to get the parking, how are we going to get this Scott and I moving back and forth, moving things around, trying to all to fit in there. Then the senior center came along as an option, and with that, with the reduction of units, there's a residential area around, and so the senior center offered a nice opportunity to bridge between a multifamily project and the residential neighborhood nearby. So, and it's a use that kind of works with that as well. One thing we usually struggle on a project is the front face of the project. Most towns and most people involved with the projects want to bring that down and soften the front edge of your project so you're not having that tall area facing right up against the street as you approach the building. So this, having the senior center, residential neighborhood, bringing scale down, reducing the units allowed us to take a floor off that front building. But we still had the 4-story building, and then we also had the height restriction. So I was really struggling with, how do I put a roof on this building? The 3-story allowed for it because that floor wasn't there, but on the back buildings, starting out with the flat roof. The more I played with it, the less I liked it, and worked with another option to try to put a little more steeper roof on the front or the perimeter of the building, and then shallow it towards the middle, so you can still see the roof from there. But on the 3-story building, we can get to a peak, and so that gave you that entry area into the site with the 3-story building on your left with the full sloped roof. As you come up Sutton Street Road from Osgood Road, it is softer approach coming from their commercial area to the 3-story building, to the senior center, and then the residential area next to it. So it kind of solved a lot of problems that we were struggling with on the project. One option we were looking at also was having the garage entrance on the end of that building, which would create more congestion rate in that front area. Was it kept working the plan and keep working with it. We were able to bring with that less parking, less area, loosened up the site a little bit. We were able to tuck that garage for building 3 right here. So you're coming in, we had it here at one point, creating congestion. This area here, now it's over here, creating an upstairs area back here out of sight. Gives a nice central place for people to make use of it on the way out. And we now allow the parking area to be in the middle. That's the other struggle we usually have is you really don't want to see the parking lot from the outside area. The people that live there, of course, will always see it because they live there, but having the 3-story building in the front, and it maximize the length of it to get the units count to work. But it also creates a screen for that area coming by, so it softens up the look of the parking lot as you're looking at it from the street. Then there's the green areas in there to help soften it up as you're inside the site as well. So we create this progression down Sutton Street, residential, senior center, 3-story, now commercial, down as you go to Osgood, but also progression into the site, senior center, 3-story, and then the 4 stories behind, so that when you're in the site, you're seeing the sloped roofs, and you're getting a softer feel to the top. Also, wider overhangs help bring that, put a cap on the building, help bring the view up the building as you look at it and cap it, where that's why I was struggling with the flat roof. It kind of, your eye kind of tends to go up and think it feels taller than it is, where if you can get that wider overhang and put a slope on the roof, you get a better residential feel that brings it down. And the other aspect that the site allowed, which I push for a lot, of the deck towers. That breaks up the length of the building, allows us to introduce a steeper pitch, to 12-12 pitch on the front, to gables, give some accent to the top. The depth is in and out. Next to the deck is a mechanical closet, brings the mechanicals out so we can keep them in there, but it creates a screen, privacy screen for the people, the residents, and we try to orient them to work with the site and the area so that you're not just looking left to right to your neighbor, you're getting your own view and also breaking up, again, the architecture and breaking down the scale, giving it a residential scale for the residents and representing what's inside it. Some of the things we did, this rendering was printed before full discussion with the senior center architect. But some of the things that already started in that discussion was the roof, standing seam simulated roof up here, which is on the senior center, would be the same color, same look to it. Shingles in a similar color scheme. We talked about, we'll match the stone. So we have some accents of stone on the building that will be matched to the senior center. Senior center is mostly white. So most of the trim and panels up here reflect that, but the color is introduced by the siding. It gives it a little more color, so this was all white, it was too strong, so I think that helped a lot. We're going to coordinate the columns and the front entrance areas. And I think the rendering you have, we talked about putting a little more, and you'll have the black frames on the windows to represent, to reflect what the senior center is, the black windows, and punch it with the black shutters at the end, and to accent the ends there.
Can I just throw in something as like just a matter of personal preference, because you talked about the 3 floors being in front and the 4 floors on the buildings in back, and I'm sure you'll hear this from some of the abutters as well. But you know, up at the front of the street, like that's in an area where the airport is,
right,
and where there's a lot of other industrial space, and so if there was going to be an area that was going to be 3 floors and an area that was going to be 4 floors, I would actually rather have the place up front be the 4 floors, because that's an area that's not close to residential abutters, and it's kind of in an industrial area that frankly is kind of unsightly anyway. Whereas the area in the back is the one that's closer to everybody's yard and is the place that I think people are going to feel is more invasive. Even though the normal intuition is that you want the stuff by the main street to be smaller.
The only thing I would throw up as an alternative to that is, are you making an existing situation worse? So you're driving down the Sutton Road and you have that slightly airport on one side, you want a taller building on the right.
I don't think that
too, where
I actually don't think it looks bad. Like I think it looks fine, and I think along that road it would be fine as 4 floors, because it wouldn't be like out of character of that particular like local area. Whereas further back, it's now close to single-family homes where like the 4 floors versus 3 floors I think will make more of a difference to the people around it. So that was just my own personal observation on this.
We're currently looking at what that impact would have on the houses, and we're developing pictures to put the building actually behind the trees.
Yeah.
And the trees are actually so high that it really, you can't even tell where the roof is. You really don't even know what's behind those.
How high is the building? Because that's probably not true.
And not
I feel like I'm going to be in the shadow of your building.
But the eave is about 42 feet.
You can't just say that, you know what I mean?
Well, what I was suggesting, I was actually trying to study it.
So you're guessing?
What?
You said guessing?
No, it's actually very accurately developed based on elevation.
How tall are you going to be, 57 feet?
42 to the,
And
then the slope above is another 10 feet. So we're got to hold a 55-foot high, but that's at the peak, not near the ridge, not
this is
the
what
ridge.
we're going to see when we look over the tree line.
Well, in the winter, in the fall, there are no leaves to obscure that.
So people will be looking in our backyards. Have you done an analysis as to what this is going to cost the value of my house?
We're in the I'm not in any position. Never trust an architect for value.
And I will actually differ from my member here. I think that 4 floors at the front of the building, granted, yes, I get you're on Sutton Street, but Sutton Street still has a large amount of single-family, maybe even 2-family homes. This, and nothing against, I think 3 floors is going to be overbearing. I think 4 floors is going to be like toppling me when I'm driving down. That's just me. So there's a difference of opinion for you.
I agree.
Thank you. I like it when people agree with me.
From a planning perspective, the way we're visualizing is we are kind of stepping down with not a building that was so high that it's going to stand out like a sore thumb, but you're stepping down to a modest 3-story building, down to the senior center, down into the residential. So as you're driving into that entrance quarter of Sutton Street, you're kind of transitioning right into the residential stretch.
Only one other thing I was going to point out too is there was discussion about the 3 buildings. I always try to push for that in the projects. It gives you a better corner unit for the project, but it also breaks up the building and opens up light corridors and softens the overall approach where the actual buildings are connected. That center U area becomes potential dead space within the building because that has exterior walls, but it softens up the ends by putting the decks. If you get more decks on the ends, it softens up the ends of the building to make more architecture, gables, and architectural features. And then created this area here, created what needs to the amenity spaces and the gathering space in here, the leasing offices in place of one of the units in the corner, and then an outdoor gathering area. That's what I had to present. Any discussion?
Just out of curiosity, so with the residency and the 3 buildings, right now, 3 levels in the front versus the 4. So how are the residents disseminated by building, out of curiosity? How many would reside in each of the buildings?
Yep, I have that breakdown for you. This was in your application packet. On page 3 is a table. So the units are broken down by studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. So in building 1, which has a total of 45 units, there's 12 studios, 15 1 bedrooms, and 18 2 bedrooms. It's the building in the front. Building 2, which is 44 units, which is abutting the China Blossom side of the property, and 4 stories. There's 8 studios, 21 bedrooms, and 16 2 bedrooms. And then building 3, which is 47 units, there are 8 studios, 21 bedrooms, and 19 2 bedrooms. So you can see how the 3 stories versus the 4, it's about the same density in each building. And we make that up, in the front building by being a little longer.
All right, well, to borrow a phrase, let's change the room a little bit. Is there anybody in the gallery who would like to be heard? Just come up, introduce yourself, name and address, please.
Good evening, Patrick Duffy, 59 Surrey Drive. I'm one of the abutters on the south side of the 505 Sutton Street property. My wife and I have lived there for 18 years. First, I'd like to say I was at the town meeting where we voted for this. And as one of the voters, I can strongly say that we should have known what we were voting on. And I would strongly urge this board to do all you can to insist that this goes back to the town meeting vote. The town should not be voting for something and then find out later that they're on the hook for $600,000 that they never heard about in the first place. That's unacceptable. Second of all, I have some serious reservations about this project. We've heard from the developer and the engineer here that for example, the 4-story building in the back is not that big a deal to residents. It's a very big deal. We're very concerned that not only will it be huge and looking down on our backyards, but they will be taking out most of the woods. So the little buffer that we have now will mostly be gone. Most of the woods, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of it, is owned by the 505 Sutton Street property. We've been talking with the developer for a couple years now, and our biggest concern has been about the changes to the character of the neighborhood. And those things are the trees. They've been there for 50 years. They provided a wonderful buffer so that we don't even realize what's going on that property. And the fact that we don't have a huge building looking down on our backyards.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, I just want to have an idea. Is your lot, can you show us what, does your lot show up on this?
Yes, my lot is the one that goes down at this angle here.
Okay.
We have the little bit of wetlands here, which is why there's a little bit more of a setback. But our house is down here, so our house is roughly halfway along the south end of the property here. So we're getting, us and our neighbors, the Fessets here, are going to be getting the brunt of this building number 3.
Thank you.
So we've been talking with the developer for a couple of years now and telling him about their concerns for the changes to the character of the neighborhood. And they've really done nothing to allay those concerns, absolutely nothing. We've suggested that they move the 4-story building to the front. I love that idea. I'd be okay with a 3-story building rather than a 4-story building in the back, but there's all kinds of reasons why that can't be done. Here's a thought. Don't put a 4-story building in the back. Have 3, and building number 2 could be 4, and building 3 can be a 3-story. Reduce the number of units. They've maximized their absolute use of this property. They've pushed out the buildings as far as they possibly can up to the setbacks, and they're asking for more setbacks from you guys now. And they've raised it to the absolute maximum. We've heard that they had to do this because it doesn't make financial sense to have fewer units. But, you know, when you offer to give the town millions of dollars worth of property, you're going to be in a hole, and the neighborhood should not have to pay because the developer chose to make this nice donation, and then they have to recoup their costs by making huge buildings with lots of units. Reduce the number of units. You'd need fewer parking spots. You could have lower buildings. I think it's a very simple solution. But I'm concerned also about how this project changes over time. We hear one thing, and then it becomes something else later on. We were told, we've been to a lot of planning board meetings, and the planning board asked the developer to mark out the trees that they would be removing, so that when we did our site visit last week, we could see what it would look like, what would be going. They said, sure, we can do that. And then we find out last week that they can't mark out the trees because they won't know what they need to take out until they're actually taking them out. And even asking for some kind of suggestions up front gets a lot of pushback and threats that they'll just cut down all the trees on their property because they can, because they own them. So I'm very concerned. I would strongly recommend that this board do all you can to limit the size and scope of this project. Is one of the variances they're asking for is number of units as well?
No, it's use, landscaping, and parking, I believe.
FAR is
Floor area ratio.
All right, well, if by turning down that request, it means fewer units, I would recommend that you do that. Another thing that changes, we just heard tonight, somebody mentioned between buildings 2 and 3, there was supposed to be a small patio area. We just heard tonight now there's going to be dumpsters there. So those will be right close to the property, our property line as well. This project just keeps changing, and I am concerned about it. Thank you. Can I answer any questions?
I'm good. Thank you.
Can I respond to some of those?
We're going to have, is there anyone else from the gallery that wishes to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, then, yeah, come on up. Thank you.
Just some clarifications. Mr. Duffy represented, and I appreciate the concerns, and first off, from the start of the design of this project, that has been the focus of our design and trying to alleviate these concerns, and we've been evolving this throughout the entire 3 years we've been working on it, starting from the 164-unit project, which just kicked us off in 5-story buildings, down to 4 stories, working with the roof lines. Where we're at right now with the planning board process, and what they asked was for us to stake out the buildings and to locate the trees and we have them on a plan. And when we were out in the field doing our site walk, we didn't go out and mark each individual tree, because really, on the plan is where you look at, okay, here's how we can identify which trees can come out and which can stay. And even during the design process, committing to certain trees staying or leaving can be a bad idea, because until you get in there and you evaluate the root system and you evaluate the condition of the tree, you might decide that it doesn't make sense for that tree to stay, and it makes sense to put in some new trees instead. So I fully expect that the planning board will be all over this at our next meeting after going on the site walk. Regarding the setbacks and the relief, we're not asking for any relief on the rear buildings. They fully comply with zoning. Where we're asking for the relief is on the front building, to keep the massing of that along the streetscape at 3 stories, so it doesn't look like a large wall as you come into the street. So that's where we're asking for the zoning relief on that building. Regarding the concern about the dumpster being between the 2 buildings, 2 and 3, that's not true. I think there was just a misunderstanding as to what Mr. Schaefer was describing. The dumpster is in the same location, backing up against the China Blossom dumpster between buildings 1 and 2. That's where it is. We're not proposing any dumpster, solid waste, or anything other than passive use in between those the 2 buildings, 2 and 3. So I just wanted to clarify that, so there's no concerns with that. And regarding the quantity of the woods, again, a number of 3/4 of the woods will be removed. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that's close. A lot of the woods are on the abutting parcels. Some of the residential parcels have cleared right up to the lot line. What we're trying to do is stitch in and patch where there are gaps in the trees. Most of what appears to be wooded is brush and shrubs and things that have overgrown over time. So I think that's it.
So I did hear you note that the back 2 buildings, 2 and 3, are compliant regarding setbacks. They are naturally a part of the project, which is 3 buildings. So maybe it's best to talk a little bit about the FAR request. Can you describe that for the board and perhaps the gallery?
Yep, so the floor area ratio, again, when we first started looking at this, we're looking at the entirety of the estate. If you look at the massing for the project, which includes the senior center land and the residential side of the land, the floor area ratio is 0.68, so, which complies with the zoning district. So we felt the overall massing of the project as a whole meets the spirit and intent of the zoning. So we started with 164 units and a much higher floor area ratio with less land. Where we are now is what was discussed at town meeting. It's been on the table since the town meeting, since meeting with the planning board at those levels. That original concept plan was based on 136 units. We haven't changed that at all. And I think with the mix of housing units that's in the packet, at studios, the majority being studios and 1 bedrooms or smaller sized units, this fits perfectly with what the market is demanding for the type of housing that we need to provide. They're not 3-bedroom units, which would have more floor area and potentially introduce, larger families. They're 2-bedroom units, smaller units, and 60% of them are singles and 1-bedrooms. So the floor area that we get to for the 136 units is what we're requesting the relief for, which is based on the line that was agreed upon at town meeting, and the remaining land where the residential project lies is where we arrive at that floor area ratio that we're requesting, the 1.2. Where 1.75 is the zoning, but again, for the entire real estate, it's 0.68.
So what would make it that you didn't need a variance on that?
Well, we do. Well, we are, yeah, because they're conveying title to the town.
How many units would make you comply? So 136, you're requesting our relief.
I can do some math. It's going to be, we're going in a different direction if that's the case.
50 or 60?
Yeah, it would be.
The easy answer is, if we didn't give the land away, we would comply.
Right.
Do you have a number?
I can calculate it for you, what that would be. If you give me a moment, I can do that.
I don't know if anyone wants to, I know you had to do math today.
Don't look at me to do math again, it's not happening. It actually took me work.
But this was approved
why I
with
did it
the
ahead of time.
contingency of the senior center land being
So
donated.
why he's calculating?
Okay, so it's really not apples for apples here. Okay, let's talk apples for apples. This was approved at town hall, the town meeting, with the contingency that the land for the senior center was gonna be donated.
Well, keep in mind, at town meeting, if you actually watch the entire thing, it's a little bit fuzzy on certain aspects. Because again, the only one that discusses the actual project, other than the chairman from planning, is the town manager we had during that town meeting. And so the zoning changes that took place were not contingent, but contingent on the land being donated to the senior center. Depending on how you actually want to listen to the meeting.
If he was just gonna be building apartments without the,
They are not legally contingent.
they're not legally?
No. So they
Wait,
were separate articles. Where they, now, in terms of Alex, Ms. Jacobs feeling betrayed in the way that things went down, it is the same, it would be the same kind of betrayal, right? It is that the people were presented with what they thought was a deal, and that deal was changed out from under them. However, legally speaking, the zoning was changed, and it was simply changed. It was not changed pending a donation of land. That is not what was in the articles.
No, that is absolutely not accurate.
That's not the way I understood it.
That is absolutely not accurate.
No, that's not the way
Because
it happened.
if they didn't get the zoning changes, the land wasn't being donated. End
That's
of
right.
story. End of story.
End
There
of
was
story.
no
Right,
ifs,
but it's
but
not
I
the
don't
other
care
way,
about.
but it's not the other way around legally. Like, if we turn this down, that zoning is still in place.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they don't donate that land, that zoning changes.
Well, then that creates a really big problem, even bigger than the one that we'd be
Yeah,
in
but
right
like I said
now.
at the last
That's the
meeting,
problem
he
with
wouldn't
what you
show up in
voted for.
town again and get
So
anywhere
that's
near a
what-
project
what
done.
Michael just described.
Okay?
I understand that,
I mean,
but
he's putting his whole reputation on the line with this.
I agree, and
Okay.
there's all kinds of non-legal consequences that may fall from that. But my point is that if you are asking if it is legally contingent, it is not.
no, but it was made pretty clear, if the zoning's not changed, the land's not
Sure,
donated.
absolutely, and certainly it was true in that direction, right?
I started this meeting off asking the planning board, is one contingent upon the other? Before we even got into 10 minutes to 10 on a second meeting discussion, I asked her, and she gave a runaround, then I said, give me a yes or no. Is it contingent? And she said yes.
The zoning is contingent on the land being donated. If they
That's
didn't
correct.
get the zoning, the land wasn't going to be donated, end of story.
Right, but it's not the other way around. I
Just-
want
just
to be
'cause-
absolutely clear
Just
here.
because you get the zoning
Right,
does
like
not
what-
mean you get the land.
We understand that.
It's not the other way
Okay.
around.
Okay, but let's not be late
Right.
with this. It's 10 minutes to 10 now.
At
Let's
town
move it along.
meeting, the question was asked, how could this affect the town? And the planning board, in their review of this whole zoning implication, looked at every B2 parcel in town that would meet the same criteria. So I think the zoning change was to allow at 3.5 acres or greater to have the ability to go for a height waiver,
And there's
special
3
permit.
pieces of property
Right.
that would end up
Yep.
affecting.
Yep.
And from what I recall, I just watched it again today.
Yeah, I understand.
I know it's
That's-
disgusting.
But they
Those
didn't.
3 pieces of those pieces of land already had, they didn't say what pieces they were, already had apparently developments on them. That's not to say they're not gonna get ripped down and sold in 15 years, but they apparently were not options that would actually end up being viable
They
with this
felt
change
comfortable
being
that
done.
way, yes.
The other big one is Charlie Matsis's land on Sutton Street. That's the other big B2 parcel that would fit
So-
under that zone.
I believe it's 210 Sutton Street. It has the gas station, Bueno Bistro, and the large office building to the rear. So that's one of the parcels that was reviewed.
Which that building is so old.
And therefore could be torn down and reconstructed.
Therefore, could be torn
Yes.
down, and here you go smack dab another huge thing.
It's,
Which actually, that would be a great spot for the same thing. Anyway. Moving right along.
So my
That
question
was
is.
fairly quick. Did you get your Texas Instrument out?
I did.
Your TI,
I did.
whatever?
It is a Texas
The
Instrument,
TI
yes.
23 is what I used to get my kids, so I'm sure it's up to what, 64 now?
No, this is a smaller professional size. I don't need all the, I don't need to program, games into it like the college kids do.
So feasibility aside, I didn't write it down. Was there an answer to the question, how many units is?
that's what we're gonna.
Oh, still figuring out.
It
I beg
equates
your
to
pardon.
44.
44?
44.
Thank you.
So 44 in total or 44 less?
Less.
So from 164 minus 44,
136 minus 44.
136 minus 44. So my question, Mr. Chairman, where do we go from there?
Is that, my understanding is that there's still discussion and questions.
Well,
Which
I'm
are
thinking about
continuing.
Ms. Jacobs' thing with the, it not being a kosher deal.
Miss Jacobs is in for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, girlfriend has spent all day watching town meetings.
I mean, seriously, do you know how boring that is? God.
And then we wonder why no one comes.
They're all watching at home, that's why.
I mean, I did extra homework. I had to find out how many people were there. I mean, then I should get a cookie.
The board discussed a site walk. Would you like to?
You know, I'll take a sidewalk if I get my own little bubble. This pregnant belly ain't walking through ticks and, no.
There's a lot of undergrowth and, yeah, bittersweet. It is.
I'll get on someone's shoulders. I have no problem.
We can see from the front, you can get in the front of the property and, you know, you can't, there is some visibility.
Is there anything marked out? Do you have stakes?
Oh, yeah,
in
it's
the
all
front?
marked out. All the buildings are marked out.
And the rear
lot
property
lines?
line.
Lot lines are all marked out. You have to get into the weeds to get to the lot lines.
Welcome to come look from the Surrey Drive side.
Yep.
Listen,
There you go.
if you see people stalking around the neighborhood, do not call the police.
Wait, just these
Where did
people?
they
Just strangers.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, just board members. I will work on swinging by.
If you want an official time where somebody that knows where everything is, let us know.
Yeah,
Set
it
something up.
would be helpful to have somebody to show you what the stakes mean. It's not going to make sense without a key plan.
Just a question, because this was something that we dealt with one of the applications that came up with us. Did planning ask for you to do a balloon
No?
to see how high? Huh? Yeah, the cell tower when we had done that. They haven't asked for you to do like a balloon so that you can actually see the height of the 4 stories?
No, we did agree to do renderings both from the neighborhood and back and from where the buildings are proposed to be, so you can kind of see from either side.
And I don't know I'm just throwing it out, when we had to do the cell tower application, they had put a balloon up so that you could actually, it wasn't, and I don't know, renderings for me, like this looks really beautiful, and 4 stories may not really be all that like insanely overbearing driving, but I think it is, and that could also be because I've gone how many decades with it being blank land. The balloon was really helpful in that situation because people were actually able to see, okay, where is this tower really going to pop out versus seeing it from a rendering. They could actually walk out their door and look up to see it. Just 2 cents, because when I did watch some of the planning, I know there were concerns and issues of some of the abutters who were talking about balconies, you know, looking over into their backyard. So no, the balloon wouldn't offer you 100%, but it might give a little bit more of a visual if you're trying to get abutters
It would
on
make
board.
clear, for example, if the balcony is going to be above the tree line or below the tree line, right? Because you can physically see it, and a rendering is going to be a little less convincing.
And this, that would depend on how many trees they cut down. So you can't know that until they do that.
Sure.
And the one thing I will say is I appreciate the natural, you know, coverage that trees create. And you're 100% right. They could knock down every tree and it not make a single difference. I guess one of the things I also do sit here is think, and we've run into this situation in other applications where they could cut down all the trees just to cut down all the trees. I mean, as much as that, and I'm not saying you guys would do that, as much as that would be...
Rain in it?
Is that rain?
Is that rain?
Yeah, that's rain.
You know, the only thing I would say to that is 2 years ago when this all started, we went to the first meeting, he came out and followed us all out and said, oh, don't worry, we're going to try to move away from do this. And, you know, listen, we live where we live. There's the airport there, there's the storage center there. It's a great place to put this project. If I was the builder, it's a great place for it. I don't deny it. But, you know, all we ask is that you don't put it so when I'm in my pool, in my bathing suit, you don't want to see that.
You could start
There's
skinny
people
dipping.
that go around looking down on me. You know, and it just seems like as much as he said, and the rest of the neighbors, especially my neighbor across the street was Wade, will tell you he's talked to him constantly. It just seems like it ended up in worst case scenario. The worst thing we could have hoped for is what it ends up being. I'm not against it being there. It's a great spot for it. It's, you know, well, what is it? It's not, you know, a neighborhood with $800,000 homes and you do it right in the middle of it. It's on a bloody street where there's how many thousands of cars go by there every day? If I'm on a planning board too, it's a great place for it. The only thing I can say is the one thing we asked, and we were led to believe that it would go that way, is that we wouldn't have that monstrosity right there. And I feel like that's going to happen. And we were led to say, oh, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. So you kind of back off a little, and you find out that the worst thing that could have happened to you is what happened to you while you were worried, thinking they're not going to do it. I guess that's my real main concern. And I do fear that it's going to knock my property value down too. I mean, I love the town. I fought to get here. I grew up with Lawrence. It's a great story. And now it's kind of getting taken away from me a little bit. So it is a little bit disappointing. And I wish the property, they'd leave the trees, get it away from it a little bit. And I'm for it. It's a good place for it.
Is there any, I know you guys have gone through it over and over and switched and changed. Is there any feasibility into putting 3 in the back, 4 in the front? Stories?
We really don't think it makes sense from a planning perspective, and I know it's going to have the most impact on the 4 or 5 people that live in the back. But when you go out there and actually you look at the trees either from their yards or from the other side, the trees are pretty mature, some of them, and obviously some of them are going to go. But that means, at least in the summer, the crowns are probably 40, 50 feet up. So I think whether it's 3 or 4, so you're not going to see that part. I'm more concerned about 10 or 15 feet up until the pine trees, until the firs grow up. I think that's what you're really going to be seeing. In the winter, yes, you're going to see from top to bottom through the trees. But I think in the summer, if you're in your bathing suit, I don't think a lot of people are going to see you from looking from the top. But I mean, we did move the building back, you know, away from the edge as far as we could and still try to fit everything. But I think from setting that streetscape, we have a real opportunity with this gateway, I've said before, to try to do something nice there on one side of the street, and I'd love it to stay 3 stories there. I mean, when you go down High Street, the buildings are awesome, but you go through kind of a canyon where they're on either side, and I love those buildings. I don't know if we want to have it on one side going down where we have this tall, but that's kind of what I'm concerned about. I think that for everybody else in the town, it makes much more sense to have the 3-story in the front.
But I'm just driving by it, they're living it. Do you understand the concerns of the residents?
When we initially presented at our first meeting, we said our hopes were to have 2 planning board meetings and come back to you. So we kind of had 1.5. The second meeting ended up being just really the A&R because they hadn't done the site walk yet, and we had just been receiving the comments to respond to. So I think, I mean, it sounds to me like we're heading towards a continuance. It sounds to me like we have some open matters with the planning board, which we still plan to discuss, and we are working, putting a lot of effort into this tree and buffering and what this is going to look like aspect of it. It's very important to us. It has been from the start. So I think with some more information and some feedback from the planning board, especially, because we really haven't gotten that feedback on 4 versus 3 from them. And my intention is not to pit the 2 boards against each other, but our team of professionals, which are land use planners and architects and engineers, you know, 3 stories is what you want on the street. The 4-story building would be a long-term mistake. And so we're trying to figure out how to make this jigsaw puzzle, and we're putting all our efforts on that backside.
Have you guys tried any other design setup?
Close to 30 or so different, I don't know, we can go back through the bills. We have gone through this, like I said, it's a jigsaw puzzle. We don't just start with this concept and throw it on. Even the plan that went to town meeting, this monstrosity, this was not the first. This was about probably 5 or 6 concepts deep at this point. And then throwing the senior center on. I mean, this phase, we probably did 5 or 6 concepts of this going through it. So no, this isn't just, you guys don't get the pleasure of going through that process as we have over the last 3 years, but every project's like this. We don't take these things lightly.
And there's no way to move it away from the back of Butters, to move it forward?
What we're suggesting is it doesn't make much of a difference. We can't move it 50 feet. We could move it a couple of feet, but we're, you know.
It wouldn't matter.
It's not gonna make a difference in the images and what we're studying right now with the existing trees and the infill that we can do that will not only match but exceed the buffering that's there now. Even in the summer months, this is year-round evergreen buffering. You know, the study that we're performing right now because of this topic, you know, we'll have to present to the planning board at the next meeting. And we'll provide that same information to you as well.
You guys are making me watch too many meetings.
Can I actually ask another question? Building number, I have to put my glasses on, the one in front of China Blossom.
Two.
Which has the least amount of units.
Mhm.
I mean, is there any other way that you can make that bigger and take from the one in the back, the one that impacts the residents the most? And the one building 2, which fronts China Blossom, and 125, which wouldn't really impact
Nobody?
the residents. Yeah,
Right, that's the natural place to have the biggest building.
correct.
I think it was a challenge initially.
Is it a slope issue? Is it, I mean, is
Yeah,
it?
because initially,
Yeah.
we had a driveway coming in over here.
Right.
And we wanted to get the driveway away from the houses and get the dumpster, get that all away. So to try to get under both these buildings, we can't make this any longer. I mean, you could talk to the slopes.
But what about going up?
No, but it's a rise and run thing for the slope of the driveway coming into that. We're trying to keep the driveway grades reasonable, and they're at 10% already coming into that garage.
Right, no, I think the question is, could you make that a 4-story?
It is.
It is.
It is, yeah.
right.
That
Can they
was-
go 5?
That's a 4.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
55-foot height limitation. You could go to 55 feet with a flat roof, but it's probably going to look
It's already
terrible.
52.
I believe it's 55 not to exceed 4 stories is the bylaw,
Oh, okay.
so, yeah.
And both 1 and 2 have underground parking, right?
Yeah. All of them.
All of them,
Oh,
yeah.
all
So
of
the
them have
parking, again, this was.
How do you get
getting rid of-
in on building 3?
So again, the original design had an egress here coming in and under this building.
Okay.
And it was a drive around and through. That's what was presented at town meeting. It had been on, I think it was on the site eligibility concept as well. There were so many.
And that was a 5-story building.
The concern here was there was a dumpster, there was vehicles and cars, and that was really close. You know, that would have been 10 feet off the lot line here.
Right.
So we eliminated that. This building is actually underground, will look like one building.
Okay, so the parking lot goes underneath 2 and then across
All
to
the way
3.
down, Right, so that's
So-
one underground garage, and then this pavilion and this one-story piece is over that garage. So this is one story here.
So between building 1, 2, and 3 having underground parking,
Building 1 also, this also has underground parking access in here.
but that doesn't give you enough parking to be able to, I don't know, reduce parking, and I'm gonna kick myself for saying this, and a 4th building to lessen the height. Like I say, I'm putting my foot in my mouth as I'm speaking the words.
But I think I said at the last meeting, let's not design it on the floor.
Well,
Let's-
and I
let's
guess
take
that's
the
just one of-
feedback and see if we can do anything with it, okay?
Because I mean that, as much as I don't like the idea of driving down Sutton Street and having a building toppling on me at 4 stories, you do have to think about the abutters more. So I guess, yeah, question becomes is if you have enough parking, can you put in another building so that you can reduce the 4 stories? And, you know, you guys are great at designing these things. I'm sure you could design something that looks really pretty.
For a 4th building, yeah.
Like I say, I
could
put my-
say that, we won't be able to do that, Rob, you can speak to that.
Point out something. We're talking about the 3 versus 4 stories. The issue really, when starting to study the pictures, is right in here. So that extra story doesn't change the concern. You put the 4th story up here, that's where the trees already are. The issue is down here, and they both made an offer that they're going to screen that level. We're seeing in the pictures that you look under the canopy of the trees, and that's where you see the building. You know, you can barely see the roof.
Well, I guess maybe that's from.
And that 4th story, when I'm looking at them, I'm like, I got 2 and 3, is there a 4th up there? Well, I'm not really sure in these pictures, and, you know, they're ready, they'll be offered. But if you screen, like they've been offering, this portion with the arborvitae, something more, you know, this all year, it's there first? That's where the concern is. And so that's reasonable to do with landscaping is at that level. Getting a 40-foot tree, not gonna happen for many years. But a 10, 20-foot tree, which is where this is, the first floor is, at ground level, so you got some low landscaping in there. Trees that come up a little bit, get you to your second floor level. And your third floor is already getting into your screening up in this area here, but we'll see what comes of that as well. But the fourth story is already up in the trees. And so I'm just concerned that we're going back and forth on the third, 3-story versus 4-story. That's what I mean by it doesn't make
Well,
sense.
here becomes the problem though. If a bunch of the trees are cut down, which going on worst case scenario here, worst case, all of these mature trees are cut down.
I wouldn't say all.
Not all.
That's not.
In,
Can't count what's on, yeah.
But
My concern is,
Hold on,
don't
hold on.
listen, 4
Okay.
stories,
Hold on,
you'll
hold on.
see the roof.
Hold on. So
You will
this,
look at it.
this becomes one of my problems. I will admit, I'm very smart, I know, but I'm a very visual person. I have to throw that in. I'm very visual. And I guess one of my problems is that we haven't gotten visuals of, I want to know what it looks like when I'm standing in back of some of these people's yards. I want to know what it looks like. I want to know what it looks like in wintertime and fall time and summertime. And I guess I sit here and say, give me more of a worst case scenario. You're saying you're not going to take down all of the trees, but at the same time, you don't know what you're taking down until you get in there, which I appreciate, which is why I sit here and say, give me the worst case. The worst case is you get in there and realize you have to take down every one of these mature trees.
That's on your property.
That's on your property. And I think that changes something because then it does allow, okay, and visually speaking, this is what we're looking at. Because I think that's when you have an issue where the 3 and 4 does make a difference. Because if you take down 3 trees that just so happen to abut the man who has a pool, now you have your 4th story looking down at him in his bathing suit. And be thankful he wears a bathing suit.
we're documenting that right now. So by the time we reconvene, you're going to have that information on a plan and in renderings and in images as best we can with the photos we can take this time of year. But we are working on that, and I can show you one way we can protect the trees is we're adjusting that limit of work line, whereas it started right on the lot line. We have pulled that back, said between 10 and 20 feet, depending on where it is along that back, in a certain area a little bit more than that.
There's 50 feet from the building to the lot line, let's say roughly, and I think we probably need realistically 20, maybe 25 feet around the building to be able to work, to get lifts in there and stuff like
And
that.
it's,
So then there's, let's say there's 20 or 25 feet of trees we can leave on our land, and then whatever exists, which is different in different lots behind us. So there might be 50 feet with some people, there might be less.
and it's not, I mean, again, you have to get in there and see it. It's not a tremendous amount of trees that are in that buffer. And where we get into the gray area is right on that 20, 25-foot line. If there's a tree close to that, can we save that tree? Does it make sense to save that tree? Because it might not be healthy, or it might, who knows? Some of them don't look great because they've grown up through the canopy of other mature trees, so you get these long, tall sticks with a little puff at the end. It doesn't make sense to save that. It would be better to take it down and infill it with more substantive, meaningful evergreen buffering.
Right. No, and I understand that, and I think, the problem just stinks is that if you're taking down a tree that's not healthy and doesn't make sense to keep for whatever reason, I have plenty of pine trees in my backyard. Those things are monstrous. And taking down one can open up, a balcony or 2 to be able to look down. So I think that becomes one of the things to kind of give a visual aspect on it. I like pictures.
Well, perhaps with that, again, to borrow the phrase, change the room, perhaps there should be a motion to continue to September 10th, and in the interim, we'll ask Valerie to work with the applicant to get a site visit scheduled, and whomever can make it, can make it.
I'll do a site visit from the road. From binoculars.
So,
I appreciate that. I'm all set with ticks. I'm good.
So you want a motion?
I make a
I think
motion
it's
to
appropriate.
continue the hearing until September 10th?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, no. We are continued to September 10th.
Do we need
And
to
we'll
wait
work
for?
with,
Thank you.
to the, is there a time waiver needed or anything? They got it. Okay.
It's already signed.
Thank you, Valerie. And then I look at the agenda and I think, is that the end of the agenda, Valerie?
Yeah, 'cause it was 2 items for
Okay.
for that one.
Yeah.
All right, then is
I make a
there,
motion to close. Adjourn the meeting.
motion made, is there a second?
Second it.
All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.